District Board meeting of August 7th, 2023. Please come to order. Clerk, please read the order.
DeBella.
Here.
Adel.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Abedisian.
Here.
Pisano.
Here.
Buell.
Here.
Bush.
Here.
Curry. Desai.
Here.
Drake. Gale. Cardo.
Here.
Gentile.
Here.
Healy. Here. Hoffman.
Here.
Oheb. Here. Holloway.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
LaChance. Lester.
Here.
Lewis.
Here.
Magnan.
Here.
Mandyke.
Here.
Maniscalco. Payne.
Here.
Patel.
Here.
Sotowski. Salemi.
Here.
Stuber.
Here.
Taylor. Torres.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Carrier. We have a quorum.
Okay. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4, approval of the meeting minutes of July 12th, 2023. Your motion?
Move to adopt.
Been moved and seconded.
Second.
Are there any additions or deletions to the minutes? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? 1,
2 abstentions.
2. A report from the district chairman.
Public comments.
I'm sorry, public comments relative to agenda items. Is there anybody remotely that has a statement? No, I guess not. Okay, item number 6. The purpose of the meeting today, we had very light of almost any, we didn't have anything on the schedule, and I thought it was an appropriate time to have the meeting so that we can be brought up to date on where we stand relative to everything that's been happening with storm water, with the problems we're having with the environment, and the question of the state legislative agenda that we're dealing with the $5 million, and basically outlined for discussion about A, B, C, D, and E. So that's the purpose of the meeting tonight, so that the staff can bring us up to date where we stand with DEEP, where we stand on the consent orders, where we stand on the issue of $5 million fund that's going to be for stormwater, or I'm sorry, for flooding, which is going to be a major problem when you start talking about flooding in the city of Hartford. That's where we're going. But Scott, do you? Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Payne here. I know you've been very busy, but I was wondering on another topic if you could work with staff. We have quite a few commissioners that are no longer here, and I was wondering if you could work with staff to recognize them for the meeting. Some of them short period of time, and some of them quite long. I would appreciate it.
Do you work with us?
If you need me, no problem.
Okay. Scott?
Thank you. Do you want to skip the CEO comments? You want to skip those?
Just to get into the
Okay.
issue.
So skipping you?
No, we're gonna,
Okay.
why don't we do?
Well, let me just do. I'm sorry. We'll skip Jamie. I'm going to skip you tonight so we can get right to it. But I first want to just say, as the chairman mentioned, we did have a meeting today with the comptroller as it relates to the new legislation and the $5 million for flooding relief to the city of Hartford. And we are working with the comptroller's office to develop procedures and policies that will be in conjunction with the MDC's policies for damage associated with any claims that we might receive. So that's going to be a work in progress. We are going to be reimbursed, so we'll be scheduling meetings and talking with the comptroller's office over the future. I do want to say one thing. It's really important, and I know Chris will elaborate, but there's been a historic event that has occurred, which is we have been successful in abandoning the water supply at the Colebrook Reservoir. In the late 40s, when we were planning to build Colebrook, decisions were made at the legislature to require MDC to release water from that dam when it was built. And at that point, it made it impossible for that water system to ever become a drinking water resource. And then the 55 flood hit, and then that made it even worse. And then the Army Corps built a dam across our 6.5 billion gallon water reservoir, which now they're acting and releasing water for flood control purposes, not for drinking water purposes. So by partnering with the 4-member towns, watershed towns, and their legislators and senators, and with Save Our Sound and Northwest Connecticut Conservancy, we were successful in receiving the abandonment for that 10 billion gallons of water that's part of that Army Corps agreement. It alleviates, or it gives us the ability to now go to Washington and to try and find a way to get out of that agreement with the Army Corps. Chris is going to be working on that. I want to give Chris a lot of credit on the legal side here. He did a tremendous job with the AG's office in getting this abandonment. It means a lot to the MDC in its future. It means that we will hopefully not be subject to a $50 million bill that will be needed to spend as part of the original agreement. We pay 35% of any improvements to that dam structure. So getting out of this water supply abandonment process with DPH is instrumental in getting us to the point where we can get out of the Army Corps. So that's it. We're going to go right to Chris.
Yeah, and let me just say one thing about that. It gives us a shortcut to go to the United States Congress.
Right.
And we were scheduled to do that when the state of Connecticut got involved in it, and it took us, 3 years to get through that process? Mm-hmm. So we're now back to where we were 3 years ago, where we thought we'd just go to Congress instead of fighting with the Army Corps. What they do is they resolve the issue from a legislative standpoint rather than get into a court back and forth. And again, did a great job, Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Chris Stone, District Council. That was an effort by a lot of people, not the least of which are the 29 people sitting here that, through their patience and support, allowed us to go through a process which at times was a little bumpy, but ultimately it worked out to be the right course of action. You supported that course of action, so we thank you for that, as well as Scott's staff, who are invaluable in providing the expertise that's necessary to pursue something that, on the face of it, doesn't look like it's very technical, but it's anything but that. So thank you for them as well. Just to give you a quick status on that, we have a meeting set up for tomorrow morning with Senator Blumenthal's office. We've spoken with our DC lobbyists about the issue. There was I don't know what it stands for, so I apologize, but there's a WORDER bill, which is a Public Works Infrastructure bill that is being, I think it's been written in the Senate. It's being worked on in the House through the Technology Committee. We hope to have an amendment, not unlike the amendment we had proposed about 2 years ago, but the same amendment on the agenda for, to amend the word bill to deauthorize the MDC's involvement in the project. The federal people have contacted DPH and DEEP about the amendment already, and both DPH and DEEP have no objection to the amendment. This is post issuance of the abandonment permit, but our state partners are joining us in supporting that amendment, congressional amendment as well. So that's all good news. We'll keep you posted. This, you know how these things happen, and whether it's in the legislature here in Connecticut or in Congress, it could be within weeks, it could be within months, but we keep pushing. And thanks to Steve Bonafonte in my office, who is our local contact with our federal lobbyist. He's done an excellent job as well. So I just have a few things I just want to go over regarding some pending litigation. I'll try to be short and to the point. Quickly update on the claims we have pending before the State Claims Commissioner on the landfill charges and the Buckingham Street Garage discharges. As you know, there's two relating to the landfill. One was filed under the old fee schedule, another was filed under the revised fee schedule. The first one is now pending in Superior Court. We had gotten permission from a special deputy from the state AG's office to bring a claim in Superior Court, so that's pending. That's good news. We have the second one for the landfill, which is pending before the state's claims commissioner. That should be decided within a matter of months, I would think, based upon their decision on the first. This is the only difference between the two is the schedule, the fee schedule. So we're optimistic that that'll be given, be released for suit. It's clear that although the state is trying their best to delay things, that the best course of action in terms of judicial economy is once that second one is released, or if that second one is released, I should say, to join the two together and have one litigation rather than two. And then the third case, the Buckingham Street Garage case, that's the one that the state, either directly or through its contractor, were actually paying the right fee, the per gallon fee for the discharge. They decided to stop because they thought it was too high after the contractor was through with the job. Even though they then paid, state paid it for several months, they then decided maybe it's too much. Whatever the reason is, that case is before the state's claims commissioner as well. And again, the same basis for the charge, the same issue on the merits. Have we provided a service? The short answer is yes. Have we been paid for that service? The short answer is no. So the standard for the state claims commissioner is whether or not, as a private citizen, if the state were a private citizen, would they be subject to a lawsuit of this nature? And we feel that we're in good shape there. The tunnel litigation, which is pending in two courts. One is a state court case in which we brought to reinstate the DRB, the Dispute Resolution Board, which is a non-binding mediation type proceeding, which we started on Reach 1, and then we lost our member because he decided he couldn't, it wasn't up to snuff and it wasn't up to speed on it, so he resigned. We were trying to reinstate that through the state court. In the meantime, a federal litigation has been filed by KOJV. It was originally filed for Reach 1. It now includes Reaches 1, 2, and 3. Includes some other claims, and it also includes our counterclaim for liquidated damages and also some what we consider to be bad workmanship. So it's going to be heard in federal court in any event. The idea of the state court was to delay and get the DRB reinstated. I've been speaking with Scott at length about this. We really have very little faith in the DRB process, which quite frankly is a contractor-driven process. And so absent any objection from the board, we're going to withdraw that case, stop spending time and money on that case, and devote our energies on really the case on the merits. And remember that it's important that we get some decision, either by agreement or otherwise, on that case, because we have a partner in funding of that case, and that is DEEP. And we don't want that the funding opportunity, or a partner to have the clock run out on their participation. So that being said, as to that federal case, we are due, originally, we wanted to mediate that case in private mediation months ago. As you remember, we went to arbitration because the federal court suggested it strongly. That didn't work. Couldn't even choose a member with the other side. So we said, why don't we do private mediation? Well, we'll do it sometime in early 2024 after we have all our discovery done, et cetera. Well, we got a call 3 weeks ago, plus or minus. They want to do mediation immediately. So we have mediation scheduled for October 4th and 5th, which quite frankly is good news. It's private mediation. We are going to have an opportunity to meet separately with the mediator to tell him, we've chosen one jointly, him our case. They'll have that same opportunity. Then we'll have a joint session, which will be held over October 4th and 5th, both days we've reserved. Hopefully we can get some resolution. You know, the real crux of the matter is breaches 1, 2, and 3 claim and our liquidated damage claim. So hopefully we'll come to a resolution there.
Chris, is there any, there's nothing binding in the mediation?
Nothing, no, it's nothing binding. But I will tell you from what your lawyers have told me, and from my research, the mediator is a mediator that works to get things done, not just to collect money, and pushes parties to see obviously everyone sees the good of their case, but to see the bad of their case or the risk of their case, and it likes to move things, puts pressure on people to get things done.
So that'll get you into the merits of what.
It's into the merit. That's into everything, Mr. Chairman. That's into the liability side of it, and it's into the damage side of it. And if we haven't, hopefully we'll reach a resolution. We're optimistic, particularly because they now want it, and I think it's a funding issue for them as well, or a financial issue for them as well. So hopefully we'll get some positive results from that. Obviously, I'll report back at each meeting, and perhaps. Hopefully we'll have to have a special meeting to discuss a possible settlement, but if that's necessary, hopefully you'll be willing to do that. The Marriott case, as you know, we had lost at the trial level. We were successful at the appellate court level. The other side, Marriott, appealed that case to the Supreme Court. That's pending. Their brief has been filed. Our brief is due in a month or so. I'll keep you posted on that case. And then finally, you recall what I call Ludlow 2, or Ludlow 1, which is the Limbrook case in West Hartford. We had the failed liner. We now have Limbrook 2. Another failure of the liner. Fortunately, through Scott's efforts and Chris Levesque's efforts in terms of keep monitoring that liner, TVing that liner at various steps along the way on a regular basis, making sure there's no problem. We caught the problem before it was a catastrophe. It did fail, but it didn't fail long enough to have backups into people's basements, into the homes, into yards, etc. So the claim there isn't about damages to people's residences. It's about our cost to fix the problem, and our cost to fix the problem is about $500,000. And I've offered to settle the case along the same, subject to your approval, of course, but along the same lines that we resolved the other case, percentage-wise. Everybody pays the same percentage. Hopefully to get it resolved without paying money for lawyers and costs and wasting time. I'm waiting to hear back, and I'll report back to you in September on that. That's it. Thank you. I hope it didn't take too long. Any questions? I'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have a 62-slide presentation we're going to go through tonight. We're not going to go through it tonight, but we tried to have a general discussion about the issue regarding flooding and how it relates to the city of Hartford and how it relates to the other towns. It's such a big topic. I mean, the agenda items here are really, 2 weeks worth of meetings every day to really understand it. The magnitude is just, it's massive. So I'm going to attempt to try and skim through this, but there's two really important things that we have to start with. We have to start with the premises. We all have to agree to that, right? And the first premise is whatever MDC is doing as part of the Clean Water Project, it's not going to stop street flooding. It's not intended to. It never was. It is not, going into specific areas that have flooding due to whatever the issues might be and fixing that problem. The things that we are doing are mandated by us, by DEEP and EPA, to do certain things. Thank God, with a lot of help and a lot of work, we've changed the mindset of DEEP, and we have changed the integrated plan on the North Hartford as a pilot, and we believe the right solution for everywhere, not just North Hartford, but for everywhere, is to separate the storm from the sewer, take the root cause out of the equation, remove the stormwater, don't collect it at the river, right? But we have to understand that what we're doing in North Hartford is not going to stop street flooding. We've had a number of meetings with the community, one on June 29th and one on July 26th. And we started those presentations out with that very thing. What we can do and what our goal is, and you've got some models of backflow prevention and how they work in the system. Our responsibility under our regulation is to make sure that sewer and stormwater that's in our pipe does not come out of our pipe and into your basement. That's our job. So our job is to, one of our belts and suspenders besides separation. Separation takes a long time. So the belts and suspenders is the first thing we do is go in and put backwater valves in your home to protect your home in the short term, and the long term is a full separation to do that. But that's really, we have to start there. We have to, because it's very, very confusing when we're talking about flooding, street flooding, and then we talk about backups and basements. In some cases, they're the same thing. In some cases, they're two separate things. And there's a lot of different reasons why there's street flooding. And so that's a really important part. As part of the attachment, I simply provided, we provided this to our towns and to our board. It's attachments. It's simply of the rainstorms that occurred in July. We had 3-4 significant rainstorms. We had one today. And the one thing we're trying to do is we have to do under our consent order, consent decree, is we have to document what conditions occurred during a storm, and we have to report every backup to every home, and we have to make sure that we're not in violation of our consent order. So that's the reason why we have to do this. It shows you pictures by storm, and it shows you, you know, the July 4th storm, which was significant. 30 minutes, you know, it was a 100-year storm, 2.3 inches of rain in 45 minutes. It's a lot of rain in a very short time frame. And it shows you the flooding, and we have pictures that show, you know, Granby areas and again, the issue regarding cleaning your streets and making sure your catch basins are clear is really, really important, because even if the catch basin is clear, after a rainstorm, they're going to cover with debris, and then you're going to have localized flooding. So this is just, again, documentation that we use working with the City of Hartford to make sure that the City of Hartford is proactive in cleaning their streets, catch basins and streets. So I'm not going to go into the details, but you see the pictures there, and we even showed pictures of West Hartford. And again, in West Hartford, you might have a different scenario. You might have street flooding simply due to the fact that there's not enough capacity of stormwater. Remember, it's a separated storm system in West Hartford and our 7 non-Hartford towns. So you might have street flooding in West Hartford because there's not a local storm sewer there, or it's not big enough. But in those cases, that doesn't affect MDC because it's responsibility of the town. So I just want to make that point. I made this point before, and I'm not going to go into them, but at the end of this slide, we have 20 some odd slides that show before and after. We talked about Albany Avenue numerous times. August 19, 2021, 3 feet of water in Albany Avenue. We showed the litter and garbage collecting over the catch basins. We did not have any street flooding on Albany Avenue on the August 4th storm. And there's a reason, because the streets were clean. So that's a very important starting point when we talk with our MDC towns about street flooding, is it the MDC's fault? Is it, whose responsibility to do what? You have to eliminate that component of the equation before you can start talking about, are the pipes large enough to handle the stormwater? If I could do this and say all of the catch basins are connected to a pipe twice the size in these storms, and the catch basins were in the condition that we're in, the water still wouldn't get in there. So you got to clean the streets. It's a requirement of the city of Hartford to clean the streets, and then we can then move and work forward to just find other solutions, proactive solutions. The other important premise we have to really talk about, and it's a dangerous one. We've been talking about the dike system for a long time here at the MDC. We've been talking about all the studies that were done. Myself, the chairman, Chris Stone, we've been to DC. We've talked to try and find funding to repair the dike system that's been identified as the need to identify and replace pumps and replace the dike system, sheeting, lots of $100 million worth of work. A gentleman at the July 26th meeting who had identified himself, I don't know his name, but he identified himself as working for, he initially said he worked for the MDC, and I don't know if that's true, but he did say he worked for the Flood Control Commission for the city of Hartford. He identified the fact that 2 of the 4 pumps in North Meadows Pond were not operational before the July storms. There were statements before and after that alluded to the fact that the MDC is in charge of the flood control system in the city of Hartford. Now, this is really, really dangerous, right? Because we're not. And I've included in the open text, there's a document here which was done for the city of Hartford. There's other documentation that are very, very clear that the city of Hartford is responsible for the flood control system in the city of Hartford, period. The city of Hartford's flood control system includes a number of different components, not just equipment, but the man-made and natural channels in which that water flows. I've presented these at, I'm going to start using the slides now. Who's got the clicker? Can I have the clicker? Sorry. So this is really important because when people say publicly that we're responsible for the flood control, it's very confusing to the public. And a lot of people are asking who, we're pointing fingers at each other. This is not up for debate, who owns the flood control system for the city of Hartford. This is factual. They're regulated by Army Corps, by FEMA. We are not in charge of the flood control system. So the facts are that the pumps weren't operational, and they're not operational, still not operational, and this is a concern to us. When we get blamed for street flooding within those areas of the South Meadows or the North Meadows Pond, that drainage structure goes to those ponds. If those pumps aren't operational, there's localized flooding. And it can go anywhere from 20 to 50% higher in terms of flooding because of those pumps not being operational. So this is really important to set the record straight once and for all. I've talked about this numerous times at numerous meetings. It's important to finally set the record straight. Who is responsible to control the flood control system in the city of Hartford? City of Hartford, as a City of Hartford, Greater Hartford Flood Commission, rules and regulations. This is all on the City of Hartford's website. This document here identified all the expenses that needed to be improved on the Hartford flood control system, including North Branch of the Park River and the pumps. So I just want, for the record, we can all agree that MDC is not responsible for the flood control system. This is the map that I presented at BPW meetings and at other meetings. Comes right from this document. Comes right from the website. It identifies the components the flood control system. This is the north branch of the Park River, which is again by ordinance for the city of Hartford, responsibility of the city of Hartford. We talked about this at these meetings. This is no matter how big the system is, you can't control that, right? You can't control, no one can control that. But what we can control is, this is the north branch of the Park River. This is, when we talk about flooding in Blue Hills and Granby areas, you have to talk about, it's not just when we're talking about dredging the north branch of the Park River. There's a question that came up about, why are we doing a study, drainage study for the north branch of the Park River and the Blue Hills Granby separation areas? Why don't you just dredge the river? Well, the answer is, you're doing the study for two reasons. The first reason is, we need to understand what the pipes look like within the streets, what their capacities are, where the water's coming from, how much storm water's coming from where. And so that's what MDC is doing. And then the other part is the drainage study needs to review and analyze, to what level does the river need to be dredged. It's not just for our separation projects. There's other conduits that flow to the channel, to the north branch of the Park River, that are city-owned. And those need to be kept up by Weaver High School. There's a 102-inch pipe that goes under the railroad and into the river. Those need to be cleaned and kept clean, and if they're not, you'll have localized flooding independent of MDC's system. So it's got to, the system's got to be, the river is part of a flood control system, and it's got to be dredged. And even if it doesn't get dredged for the MDC, it should be dredged for the community, because it's affecting the community. These are just befores and afters of storms where these outfalls that go to the river are clearly underwater, and you've seen these pictures before. This again is that 102, 108-inch storm outfall by Weaver High School, owned by the city of Hartford, and it allows water from that Weaver High School area to drain to the river. When this is blocked, the water can't get out. It backs up into the city. The challenge is, the MDC is getting blamed for that blockage, for that drainage, for that flooding, and trying to separate the difference between flooding and sewer backups in your basement and what this is caused by not maintaining it is very difficult to explain to the public. What's happening? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. The other question was in the agenda, and this is a big topic, right? The other question in the agenda is, how much wet weather flow is coming into Hartford, and how is that wet weather flow affecting Hartford versus West Hartford impacting themselves, or Weathersfield impacting themselves? These are the flows that you've seen before, wet weather flows that are coming into the Hartford plant, and basically all of these wet weather flows that are coming in. Now, I'm going to give you some examples. The flows that come in from Bloomfield do not impact Granby, Blue Hills area, because the trunk sewer that comes from Bloomfield comes down Mark Twain, thank you. Mark Twain. So it's separate, and it's not affecting Blue Hills. What's happening in Blue Hills is just the nature of the community and the water that's being generated at that site. That 102-inch is having an impact, and that water's coming from a little river, a brook from Bloomfield. But in general, that trunk sewer is not impacting Hartford. However, you look at New Britain Avenue and from West Hartford, and that's a different animal. It is impacting Hartford. So it's a complicated topic, and you almost have to look at every street individually to see how is one community impacting another community based on these wet weather flows. So we'll leave that for another day. Yeah, so it's almost like you're gonna have, at some point, every town that flows into Hartford, you'll have some point where that system that flows right across the border is gonna impact locally that area. But you might have, like Blue Hills and Grammys, those areas are not impacted by Bloomfield, it's impacted by itself because of just the amount of homes and the amount of stormwater that's hitting those hills and running down. And one major problem with Blue Hills and Granby is the railroad. It blocks the water from getting to the river. So a lot of the flooding occurs behind the homes, right up against the railroad. We have a little video, and I know you've seen this before, but I'm sure you haven't seen this before, but you've seen some of the graphics before. But yeah, if you can, it's just a way to it's one of our 1-minute videos that help us. Do you have a audio? That just helps us explain this problem. You can't solve a problem if we don't address it, right? Address the root cause.
It was working earlier.
I know.
Sign language.
No luck, huh? No. Okay, let's.
Is it available in open text also?
That's fine. This video basically just shows. Why don't you go ahead and play it, and just so we can, they can see it. We can talk through it. This video is to talk about, how important as we separate the system, we need a place to dump that clean stormwater, and the North Branch of the Park River is part of the flood control system for the city of Hartford. And so we need it, as well as the community itself needs it, to allow that water to flow into the river. And this just shows how not having that river dredge impacts the overall ability for that water to get out of the pipe. So you can see here the pipe is flowing fine on a dry day, and there's plenty of capacity. And then you get the rain, and you wind up filling up the basin because of the sludge on the bottom of the river, the mud on the bottom of the river, and you wind up with the water can't get out. And that's in part what happened at Blue Hills, Granby area in the August storm, is the water can't get out. It doesn't have a place to go, and it simply backs up into the community. So go ahead, you can kill that. This drainage study, I already talked about why it's so important to do the drainage study for both the separation work we're doing and for the river itself and for the city itself. I hate trying to plug in videos on a PowerPoint. Okay, so this is kind of that we use this for the video. You've seen this before. We presented this at BPW to talk about this very topic. I'm just going to use an example. I've used this before, Westbrook Village. Westbrook Village wanted to connect to this pipe. New development wanted to connect to an existing pipe because it already goes to the river. The challenge is the river's surcharged with mud, so the capacity of this pipe is affected by the mud in the bottom of the river. And so when you ask to connect to an existing pipe, you're going to wind up creating a backup all the way into Granby Street. Now, we've had a couple of meetings. We had one last week. We had one last month. And one of the conversations we're having, at least we can have, is we don't want to go to a community asking them to trust us to let us separate their streets and build new infrastructure to improve their community while continuing to allow to make it worse, right? I can't imagine if I had to explain that I allowed Westbrook Village to connect to this pipe, and that was only going to make the surcharging in Granby Blue Hills worse. So the developer did the right thing. The developer decided after a year and a half, they're going to build their own outfall for their development that goes right to the river. We said and agreed, once you build it, we will take ownership of it. We will maintain it. So great, win-win for everybody. But this is a very important component of, trying to utilize existing infrastructure that doesn't have the capacity for development. Next slide. These are just a list of projects that, one challenge we have, and I've been blunt about it, we have a lot of challenges, not just the City of Hartford, but in this case with the City of Hartford with development. The City of Hartford is responsible and has an ordinance to comply with on-site stormwater storage. They've initially told Chris last week or 2 weeks ago that they got rid of this ordinance. We still see it on the books.
They repealed part of it.
Repealed part of it, and this here, sorry, which is 6.14. This basically requires any development that's going to build in the City of Hartford, they have to comply with this regulation, and it requires them to do peak runoff discharge rates calculations for storm activity on a 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storm. Basically, you have to store everything on site. You can't put any peak flows into the sewer system that's going to affect and surcharge the system. We have identified everything that the City of Hartford has identified, except we've added the 1-year storm because we have to. Part of our consent order, consent decree, we have to analyze a 1-year level of control. And we have also added the additional volume, which is part of a NEPDES permit, which we have to work out issues with DEEP on, which says on any new development, not an existing development, but any new development, we cannot add any new stormwater to an existing CSO pipe. So that's a whole story in itself, but this is just an important point. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's really important, because the flooding, the street flooding that's occurred since August of 2021 has driven this discussion, right? You got to remember the history. In August of 2021, we were identified by a property owner, and possibly hasn't been brought, but we're identified as a possible lawsuit for allowing MDC allowing the Housing Authority City of Hartford to connect to the sewer system in 2004. So this is why we have to make sure that what we're doing is not going to adversely impact the community around it and violate our ordinances and or the city ordinances. So these are MDC ordinances that are the same for all towns. If a developer is going to build a development And that development requires them to increase the infrastructure size capacity, whether it's water, sewer, storm. Every developer is responsible to pay for, by ordinance, is to pay for the expansion of that development at their cost. We cannot charge by ordinance. We cannot charge our customers. We cannot charge, the towns. We cannot charge our ratepayers. So these ordinances are what would have to change in order for us to make decisions on expanding the role of MDC when it comes to increasing our system's capacity for either future development or even for flooding. If we wanted to, the board wanted to say, we're going to, for flooding, we're going to increase the size of our system to handle a storm of whatever storm intensity the board so choose to accept, then we would need to change the ordinance. If we wanted to expand the ordinance to say if any developer needs a sewer, water, or storm system improved to accommodate that, just that specific development, we would need an ordinance change. So,
Mr. Chairman, are we accepting any questions as we go along this, or Scott, do you want to?
you're happy.
I just have a
Happy
question,
to.
if I could. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So Scott, when we're talking about this, and I'm just going to take for an example, in the city of Hartford, it could be any one of our municipalities, we have a lot, and it is paved, okay? Currently used for parking. And I'm a developer, and I want to come and I want to build an apartment building that is 4 stories high. There was one there back 30 years ago, and now we want to go ahead and build an apartment building. It's already paved. I'm not taking away green. I don't have any trees on the property, no nothing. In fact, I might even add some trees around there, okay? To me, just explain this. I'm not increasing any flow into the stormwater system because I already got pavement there. If I put up a 4 or 5 story structure. In fact, I might even be able to divert a little bit. So I'm just trying to understand, if I put a structure up there, how is that different than if I have a paved parking lot that's not, no water's getting through, it's got to go into our system. So can you just?
Yes. So can I use specifics? We'll talk about, it's a perfect example. I'm going to use 2 examples. There's a developer that's planning to develop a master plan for, they call it Bushel South, and that's really the Capitol Avenue area. And as the commissioner mentioned, most of that is paved. It used to be dirt years ago, but it's paved. As part of those developments, there was 55 Elm is being modified as well, and it's going to be turned into housing, I believe, as well, right? So 55 Elm Street, existing property, they have to comply with, they have to comply, oh, just went the wrong way, sorry. They have to comply with that for the city. They have to comply with it for us, but it's very easy for an existing property to comply, right? They did some modifications. We asked them to, our goal is to separate the system everywhere. So we ask a developer and they agree they're going to bring separate pipes to the curb line and they're there for the future. So 55 Elm is fine. Bushel South is the larger footprint. Parking areas, I was actually in that parking lot today with Chris and the chairman to talk to the comptroller. When you have a paved area, the simple logic is it's the same footprint. What's the difference, right? Well, if you look at the catch basins in the area, there's not a lot of catch basins, and the majority of the parking lot's not pitched to the catch basin. You'll see the water running off the into the driveways into Capitol Avenue, and West Street doesn't have one catch basin on it, so the water goes down, West Street goes down Clinton Street, and it hits Elm. And I've said this before, is that when you look at how much water collects in the Pulaski Circle, you understand it's coming from that area. So the area in Pulaski Circle is actually separated, and there's a separate storm system there, and it's connected to the pump station controlled by the city of Hartford. So we notice a lot of flooding there during rain events. We did clean the catch basin, or had the city clean the catch basins, and we didn't have any flooding today, which is a positive thing. But when you build a building, you're required to comply building code, state, federal building code, the city's ordinances, our own ordinances. Now you're going to build a roof, and you're going to have collection. It's got to be collected by city ordinance and by any standards. You cannot. Right now, what's happening? The water runs off those parking lots into the street and finds its way somewhere. That's illegal, right? That's called sheet flow. It's illegal. You can't do that. But it is what it is. It's a big parking lot. There's no catch basins. No one's going to complain about that. But when you build a building, you're going to have to comply with all these stormwater runoff regulations, which is the standard is DOT. DOT sets the standard, and everybody in the industry adopts DOT standards. So they're going to build this big building with roofs, and they're going to have to collect it. Now the challenge is going to be that is considered an existing, not new. That's considered existing because it already has limited infrastructure, but it's there's some catch basins on the property. So we consider that existing. So the question is there enough capacity in our system on Capitol Avenue to accept this new stormwater coming? So we do our analysis. We use a swim analysis, which is a nationally known hydraulic model that every engineer in the world uses. And we've identified on the Bushnell South project, we've identified that under a 10-year storm, which is the standard for the industry, that the system does not have a problem handling that additional stormwater. But what we have identified is it creates a CSO right in Pulaski Circle, which is where it overflows to the river, and it doubles it. It goes from 700,000 gallons overflow to 1.4 million. So the system can handle it, but it does create a consent order problem for us. So we need to talk to DEEP about that, because DEEP says in our NEPDES permit, it says no new stormwater in an existing CSO pipe. It also says it can't adversely impact your CSO. We're spending billions of dollars, $4 billion, to remove CSOs by approving a development that increases the CSO. DEEP's going to have a problem with that. To your point, there's projects in the area that we're going to be meeting on with DOT, and there's hopefully a potential opportunity to partner with the DOT. I truly believe, and I've said this before, DOT gets to skate a lot on these things. They don't really do what they should be doing. Albany Avenue, Blue Hills, and this area as well. We need to hold DOT accountable. But in that case, just say, let's say DEEP says, no, you can't increase the CSO by 700,000 gallons. Well, we would go back to this ordinance, which says you must store the water on site. And remember, we don't want the water to leave the site in a peak flow and then create surcharging elsewhere. So this is a standard. Every development in any town, any of our towns, anywhere in Connecticut, and including Hartford, has to comply with this. And we have the same requirement, except we add the 1-year storm because of the consent order. These two documents are identical to one another, and they all follow the DOT standard. So Bushnell South is not an issue in terms of using the CSO system, but we do have an issue with the CSO overflow that we have to work out with DEEP. And so either way, this has got to be complied with. And it's not just an ordinance. It's a practical engineering exercise that has to, we can't, even if this ordinance from the city of Hartford didn't exist, we still have to do it, because we can't dump water into the system at peak flow during these storms and create surcharging, because then you'd have the circumstance like 2004 where somebody said, Mr. Jellison, why did you allow that development to connect to the system when it was making it worse. Now the discussion becomes, do we go back and change our ordinances to allow and expand that system so that the developer doesn't have to pay for that expansion? Or is it a partnership with the city of Hartford, the developer, and the MDC? But presently, or the state of Connecticut, but presently, we don't have the authority to pay for the expansion of the system for the purposes of a developer. So that's our challenge. And that's really the heart of, this has all been brought out because of street flooding. But it's really the heart of the conversation. Here's our goal, right? Our goal is to never build another tunnel anywhere. And we've learned a lot of good lessons. DEEP and EPA have too. That's great. That's awesome. So moving forward in the future, our goal is to separate everything. So if we were ready to separate this area, we're not, because we have an affordability issue, right? We're spending $4 billion, and we're trying to comply with a consent order, consent decree. So this area is not a priority for us. But when it becomes that priority, and areas like it, we will separate, and then you won't have this problem. You'll have a separate storm pipe in the street. You'll have development be able to connect. The challenge is, what do we do between now and then? And that's where we got to really figure out. I know it's not a great topic, but we have prioritized the Clean Water Project. We have said, and I use East Hartford as a good example, they're not getting anything from the Clean Water Project, but they agree to pay because it's the right thing to do. Because whatever we spend in Hartford, West Hartford, or Newington or Wethersfield, it's going to cost East Hartford, Windsor money through Avalorum, through the Clean Water Surcharge. So not every town is going to benefit from the Clean Water Project, but they'll benefit overall by reducing their costs. We should be doing the same thing with stormwater management. The only way that we're going to control this beast, these 250-year storms, is going to be prioritized. We can't do every town. But what we can do is prioritize the ones that are affecting our community the most, that are surcharging our community the most. We've got to get our towns to do their part. I use this example all the time. West Hartford, they've identified $300 million worth of stormwater projects. We need Newington and Wethersfield to do the same thing. But it's such a huge expense. No one's going to do it unless they're forced to. And here's what I'm afraid of. We have a window of opportunity to do this. And I'm talking about, pick a number, 5 years. But with everything that has happened, you've got EPA, you've got DEEP focused on Hartford. And rightfully so. They weren't focused on these issues in the past, and they should have been. But what's going to happen is you're going to wind up seeing some of our towns getting consent orders specific to stormwater. And when that happens, they're going to divide us rather than if we were united and we could meet and talk with EPA and DEEP, just like we did on the Clean Water Project. Listen, leave this area alone. We're going to focus on this area. It would allow us to prioritize for our 8-member towns instead of every town spending billions of dollars on their own trying to accommodate some consent order that they get. So my fear is if the towns start getting consent orders, everyone else is going to say, well, thanks, I'm out. I'm not interested. But there's an opportunity to have a unified voice for our 8-member towns in front of DEEP, in front of EPA, like we did on what just happened with North Hartford. That's what we need. If we wait, they're going to start to pick off town by town based on stormwater, not based on sewer. Yes.
She asked a simple question. If simply surface runoff is not different than what used to be, answer is different than what you made out. Basically, we have existing deficiency in stormwater and it is not handling. So every time we have a new opportunity to correct it, we are requiring developers and towns to work together and to correct it. That's a simple answer.
Commissioner,
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, one fundamental problem in my mind with all the way we're going down, by taking the storm water out of the tunnel, it's no longer going to be treated before it goes into the river, which for the most part makes sense. But what about some of those slides we saw earlier with all that trash kind of corroding, coming down the Park River? Does that get diverted before the water goes into the river, or what happens?
So I've said this a lot here in this boardroom, and it's 4 S's is the MS4 rule. And you're absolutely right, Commissioner. This is the new clean water project. It took 45 years for EPA to realize that stormwater is the problem. And they went after communities like ours to do the clean water project, and we're doing it. But they're now realizing, and they've proven it by approving what we just got, the new consent order, the IP integrated plan, the amended integrated plan. They realize that stormwater is the problem. And the MS4 was intended, the next step in 5, 10, 15 years is to start treating stormwater. No doubt. That's coming. Now, is that 20 years from now? I don't know. But I would agree with you. You've got a whole nother topic of, you've got stormwater mixed with sewer. It's going to go to the tunnel. It's going to get treated. When you separate stormwater and you send it to a river, like the North Branch of the Park River, or to the Connecticut River, or Trout Brook, EPA is going to come in at some point under MS4 rules and say, you've got too much petroleums in there, you've got this, you've got that, too much bacteria, and they're going to force communities to treat stormwater. So you're right, that's coming, no doubt about it.
Commissioner Torres.
Just a couple of questions and concerns. One is that, as I'm confused, I kept on hearing from the city that the ordinances were changed, that those impediments to development were no longer impediments, that we reconcile with the city. In fact, if those things were, not because we may have read it on the website, maybe it wasn't changed on the web page, but did we, sit down with them and literally reconcile what it was that was changed and what is different now from what was before? Because, you're saying one thing and I'm hearing something else from the city. So that's one issue.
Yeah, Commissioner, can I answer that?
I have some other issues I want to.
Go ahead. I'll leave it to you. You want? I can answer that, or you want to go on?
Let me finish and then you can ask. Okay. The other issue has to do with the bigger issue, and I think for those of you that read the New York Times, there's an article I think I had you take a look at that. It's a national issue. The infrastructure for our cities, for the most part, are so antiquated that there's no way in heaven that we'll be able to solve the major flooding problems in our cities with the limited resources that we have today because of climate change in particular and because of other issues. So it's kind of a pipe dream to think that you're going to wave a wand and somehow we're going to reduce all this massive flooding that's taking place throughout the country, right? It's not going to happen. Having said that, isn't it, and this is something that maybe Chris can answer also when he answers the first question, the responsibility of ownership of both the stormwater and the sewers piping in the city of Hartford, the responsibility of the MDC. And I said, you have to answer that later. Okay. If that's the case, okay, and we have an antiquated system in the city, which I think, and may be wrong, but correct me on this, in large part is the responsibility of the MDC, like it or not, just like we have other responsibilities in Heartland, paying their taxes on, properties that, We took over because they wanted to build a reservoir and so on, and other issues. That somehow we now put the onus, on the developers to rectify a problem which will never be solved because the flooding will never be taken care of. Okay, given the information that we have today about the nature of the beast, that the real issue to resolving these problems, whether it's in Hartford or our member towns, and is that at some point we need to look at the capacity of those pipes that are taking in all of that rainwater that flow, so that we can at least reduce the amount of flooding that takes care of the flooding on the streets, and not then put the onus on the city and the developers, which stagnates the development of any revenue producing sources for a city which is already strapped severely by the nonprofits, and parks and cemeteries that take up 3/4 of the land, which is not taxable in the city of Hartford, so that so whatever development the city can have, is stymied by these constraints of pipes that do not have the capacity at this time to do that. So that's what I'm looking at in the big picture, and what this means in terms of Hartford's ability to be able to, take care of its own issues when it can't even develop because of all of these, additional constraints that we have. So, that's what I wanted to say, because I think it's a little more complex than that. And yeah, we got these laws and ordinances and that sort of thing, a lot of antiquated stuff, as you mentioned before. Now, finally, people are realizing, hey, you know what? It's a stormwater, that's creating the problem. Okay, well, we've got to do something about that, and we can't kill the city of Hartford, with these artificial obstacles that that are going to not allow the city to be able to survive. It's not going to survive under the circumstances. To date, we enjoy the MDC. The fact that our massive infrastructure, our buildings and and everything that we have that we own for the most part, resides in the city of Hartford. And luckily we don't pay a dime in taxes or anything, at all. Not even the pilot, because we're exempt. The city can't get anything from that. So here we go. We get hit from one side, we get hit from the other. And we need to be creative and figure out what we need to do to be able to help Hartford, do for itself. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking for reasonable ways to be able to capture what available resources we can develop so that we can be a viable city. That's the two questions I had for Chris. I don't know if you have time to answer them.
If you wanted to respond. The easy one first, that's your first question, is I have had conversations and email exchanges with the Corporation Counsel's office in the city of Hartford, and asked the same question that you posed to me. I just wanted confirmation that the section that was referenced up here, 16.14.1b, whether that's still in the Hartford Municipal Code or not. And I know you were in meetings that we had with the Hartford representatives, and that issue came up as well. And there was an amendment to that stormwater ordinance from December of 2022. I think it's December 12th was the meeting. I could be wrong, but within the month of December 2022, and that he sent me the copy of the amendment according to the city council's, the Court of Common Council's minutes of that meeting, and the proposal that was adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately adopted by the city as Court of Common Council. And what they amended was, amongst other things, but the primary thing that they took out of that ordinance was the $3 per gallon charge in the event the developer could not maintain a zero runoff from their site and had to discharge a certain, stormwater into the, quote unquote, into the system that whomever owns it, right? But into the system, they would pay $3 a gallon, which obviously, if you want to talk about curbing development, that cost could be prohibitive based upon the rains we're having now, right? So that was repealed. I did not see any repeal of the ordinance that Scott had up on the screen, 6.4 A or 1B. I didn't see it, and I, in fairness to Attorney Rifkin, I sent him another email saying, my understanding is, I sent him a copy of this. I said, my understanding is that flood level, or I'm sorry, rain level, 5, 20, 10, 25, 100-year storms is still in your ordinances. And I sent it, what we have, to him, and I haven't heard back from him. That's fine. I'm sure he'll get back to me. But as I sit here right now, it appears that is still in the city's ordinances. And I don't need to be right. I just need to be accurate, right? So we'll see what Attorney Rifkin sends back to me, and obviously I'll report back to the board. So that's the status on that. On the other issue, we have a recognition that there is a good percentage, over 75%, I think. I know that you had Commissioner Stuber has an idea of how much percentage-wise of the stormwater, of the storm system pipes the MDC owns. There's a certain part that the city owns. There's a certain part that the state owns. But we own certainly a vast majority of the sewage pipes or stormwater pipes within the city of Hartford, primarily because it's a combined system in a good part of the city as well. So that's not an issue as far as who owns it. The question is, if there's improvements necessary, how do you pay for that, right? And in our meeting, I indicated we have two different ways that we pay for, whether it be water, sewer, or stormwater improvements, and that is the layout and assessment process, where we do a job, costs are estimated, and those properties that are specially benefited by that improvement pay an assessment, whatever that might be. We don't have that type of ordinance in our, or we have that type of ordinance for all three of those improvements: water, sewer, stormwater. The other way is through a developer's permit agreement, where a developer of a site, whether it be a developer in West Hartford, Hartford, East Hartford, even though they have their own system, if we've got to build a sewer, a sanitary sewer, in the non-Hartford towns, they go through a developer's permits process. In Hartford, they would do the same, only not just for sewer and water, but also for stormwater. And we've had those. Much of the separated stormwater system that MDC owns, not a majority of it, but much of it, is the result of developer permit agreements where the developer has paid for improvements to the storm system. And that's for example, there's a recent one is Westbrook Village, where the developer is going to pay for that improvement, that connection. And I say you, I mean all of you want to have a different way to fund the stormwater system within the city of Hartford in whatever combination, either all MDC responsibility, a combination of the city MDC, the state, what have you, then it should be proposed in an ordinance, and we can have that discussion. It's going to take it's probably a longer discussion than we can, extend to it today, but it's something that discussion should take place. And it's not about, from our perspective, it's not about whether, promoting or curtailing development. It's about the impact of whatever it might be, development on a system that is taxed, a system that is violations of which of our consent order would bring in fines to the MDC. And what can we do now with the existing system to make it work better? And there's things that the city, to its credit, has done along Albany Avenue in terms of the catch basins, and right out here at Pulaski Circle, the catch basins. 2 weeks ago, we got a call Glassy Circle was flooded after a rainstorm. The most recent rainstorm I saw today, it's dry. It's because the catch basins were cleaned. There are some immediate things that can be done to help the system. And it tells you one thing, Commissioner, it tells you that the system's not as antiquated as one might think, because it has functioned properly with certain ongoing maintenance, whether it's be by us or the city or the state. But it can function.
It can only support so much.
But we can only support so much rain. I think you indicated at a meeting, how much, you're not going to build a system that's going to alleviate street flooding in a 200-year storm. Just not going to happen. It's not affordable. So where do you set the bar? The DOT sets the bar at a 10-year storm. And when we separate sewers, the pipe we leave is a pipe that will satisfy that 10-year storm requirement. We all know that the 10-year storm is becoming the 1-year storm in terms of frequency. And so, as you said, it's not just our problem, it's a national problem. We'll talk later about some things that Congress is doing to put their toe in the water on funding at a national level, but it is becoming more than just the city of Hartford.
I have to say a couple of things.
Let's differentiate between the issue of the stormwater and the issue of development issues. The constraints put on development, as opposed to the bigger issue, which is, the overriding flooding and the storms and that we're going to be getting, which will create flooding, irrespective of what you do with development. You're still going to get the flooding.
Yes, thank you. The decision's been made by MDC staff multiple times in this meeting that street flooding in Hartford would not occur if catch basins were cleaned properly. And I think that this just can't be allowed to go without comment. The city, in particular, in light over the past few years, as we've seen increasing amounts of stormwater falling, is very, very scrupulous about going out and cleaning catch basins in advance of storms when they occur. And a lot of the images that were put into the slide deck that folks have been provided this evening are clearly images of streets that have been photographed as in wet conditions following severe storm flooding. And you can well imagine that when storm floods inundate streets, that they sweep across private property, they upend trash cans. I've seen this on my own street in which I live. And that debris is carried toward points of drainage, and the waste accumulates on top of storm grades. And so this is something that, if you go out and you take these photographs prior to storms, you would see that they're cleaned. We clean these out routinely prior to storms, and we come back and we clean them up afterwards as well. We send crews out, try to clear catch basin covers where we see or hear that there are blockages that have occurred. But the fact that the system cannot handle storm waters that fall and cannot sustain the blockages that accrue as a result of accumulated storm waters that have accumulated as a result of an inadequate storm system is not something that's within the city's power to control. So that's one of many comments I would make on a number of things that have been said this evening. I would also venture to say that the comment made about the city's storm ordinances, I think the question was posed by Commissioner Mandyke earlier about, what is it that would prevent the development that's already paved, that's already shedding 100% of stormwater that falls on into the system from being developed. I don't see how that's, even if that is an accurate depiction of what the city's current stormwater ordinances are, I don't see how that would be a barrier, because the ordinance that you put on the screen says that it's to the standard of pre-development. So if a site is entirely paved and all of its water is shed in the MDC system, that could hardly be, you're not going to have more stormwater falling on the same site as a consequence of development. Lastly, just the point was raised by another commissioner earlier, who is responsible for the stormwater system in Hartford. It's completely unambiguous that the MDC is the sewer and stormwater authority for the city of Hartford and has been for 100 years since the city gifted the entirety of its then existing storm system to the MDC. And the MDC is obligated by its charter to continue operating the system in the same manner that the city of Hartford would have had it continue to retain ownership. And so for to assert that the city had to continue to maintain ownership of its own stormwater system, that it would have maintained that stormwater system in such a condition that it would be impossible to redevelop vacant lots, that it would allow the system to be that constrained, that it would have that little capacity to operate, is I think just ridiculous. And I think it shows that the MDC has not lived up to the responsibility that it assumed 100 years ago. And to then turn around and thrust this back onto the city, say that the city needs to fix this problem, the city needs to pay for it. Oh, and by the way, the city can't be allowed to continue to grow and develop its economy because the MDC system is too constrained to allow this development. Is just an impossible to bind to place the city of Hartford and the people of Hartford into. So we have to be a bit more forthright about these conversations and honest about where responsibility actually lies. And it seems, if you listen to the overall tenor of the presentation made this evening, you would think the responsibility lies absolutely everywhere except for with the MDC. And that's just not honest. And I think we owe our constituents and all of our member towns and customers a bit more honesty than that.
Are there further commissioners?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Commissioner Payne here. I know Newington, Rocky Hill, and a lot of towns have gotten a lot of development over the years. And the developers in our towns are putting in storage, underground storage, to retain the stormwater. And this can be done in Hartford. The developers can do it. It's economical. It can be done for projects. So I don't understand what the problem is. I mean, these storage facilities underground, and then it's slowly released at non-peak times. So development shouldn't be strained in Hartford because of stormwater, because there's methods to retain this stormwater for a period of time and then release it slowly. The other thing I wanted to ask was, Scott mentioned that 2 pumps were not working. I'd like to know if those 2 pumps that were not working contributed to the flooding problem.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I can speak to the pump issue. It is true that on the July 4th storm, that Mr. Jelson indicated there were 2 pumps that were out of service in the course of being repaired, but there were 4 pumps total. There were adequate pumps being operated in order to clear the water that was being sent to them. So to say that street flooding that occurred on that day was due to pumps not being operated by the city is simply not accurate.
If I may, I hope I didn't say that. What I said was MDC's concerned that there's a misunderstanding in the public that MDC is responsible for the flood control system in Hartford. And we are aware, as you just indicated, that 2 pumps are not operational on North Meadows. And what I did say is that without the pumps operational, you will increase the flooding from anywhere from 20 to 50%. So when we talk about street flooding and we talk about these things that can be done, I started my presentation with, let's remove all the variables, right? Let's get the variables off the table. Let's agree on, let's make sure the pump stations, the flood control system is operational, make sure the rivers are dredged, make sure all the components of the Flood Commission are operational. I just want to make a point that in the presentation, to your point, Commissioner, you talked about, I used Albany Avenue as a good example. Albany Avenue is what should happen. Albany Avenue, the pictures are here, you've seen them 1,000 times, lots of garbage on Albany Avenue, and we had street flooding in Albany Avenue. We did not have street flooding in Albany Avenue because the streets were clean. It was a 154-year storm that occurred on July 4th, and there was no street flooding. The only property that got damaged in those storms was the church on Woodland and on Woodland and Albany. And we've been waiting, almost 3 weeks for permits approvals from the city of Hartford for that backwater valves to be installed on that property. These are the things that we don't like to talk about, but we're not going to sit back and watch the MDC get blamed and not have the city of Hartford do its job. These pictures, I took these pictures, my staff took these pictures. This is a typical wet weather protocol that we send out for every storm. And 2008, I created this because of lots of issues like this. This was Wednesday of last week. We are anticipating a rain on Friday. To your point, Commissioner, these are pictures of that day, Wednesday. And yes, the city did go and clean these up, but only because the MDC and the CEO is out there taking pictures on Pulaski Circle. I mean, this is not right. We got to have a partner. I've been asked to partner with the City of Hartford. I need City of Hartford to be my partner. I need them to make sure that these catch basins are clean. These were all taken on Wednesday, and yes, your staff was out there on Wednesday night cleaning these catch basins, but only because I sent these pictures to the City of Hartford. So we've got to be honest with ourselves. This is a fact, and we are willing. MDC is willing to help all of our towns, but we've got to have the towns help themselves, and this is not acceptable. I am not in charge of cleaning the streets of the City of Hartford. Just cleaning the catch basin cover right before a storm because I call and make a stink about it is not the solution. There needs to be a street sweeping program that's implemented as part of MS4, which is permitted by the state of Connecticut, and it's got to be done on a regular basis. The City of Hartford has admittedly, look, I don't want to bash the City of Hartford, but we have to start to realize that these are the things we have to remove from the equation, and then we can have an honest conversation about how much capacity needs to be built into the MDC's CSO system, and whether or not the board so chooses to change ordinances and say, let's just have MDC increase the size, the capacity of the system. Rightfully so, the other 7 towns, a developer is going to say, I need to connect to the sewer pipe, but it's not big enough. I need to make it bigger. We don't say, or the board could choose to say this, but we say to them the same thing. You've got to, whatever capacity is necessary for the development purposes of that development, we cannot charge our other towns and our other customers for that development. This is a standard in our ordinances. All I ask you is I need the City of Hartford to recognize this is a problem. And it's not fair for street flooding that occurred in August of 2021. The MDC got blamed for a lot. Yes, we are absolutely responsible to make sure that that sewer does not come in through that system in the house and surcharge that home. That's our job. That's our job. But water that comes in outside of the footprint of our infrastructure is not our responsibility. If the board so chooses that we should take that responsibility, it'd make my job a lot easier, right? But we have an ordinance. I got 7 other towns are expecting me to comply with an ordinance that is up on the wall here. So we have to recognize, let's remove the items we can remove. And street cleaning is one of them. And the Flood Control Commission is another one. 2 very, very important components to getting to a solution. But if I could click my fingers and I could put a bigger pipe under these catch basins on Wednesday afternoon, it wouldn't have mattered. Wouldn't have mattered. Now, was there street flooding on these areas? No. Was it because the catch basins were cleaned? I don't know, but it's a good step to say there's no street cleaning, no street flooding. I know for a fact, Chris Stone just mentioned Pulaski Circle. There was no street flooding in Pulaski Circle. And there's only 6 catch basins in Pulaski Circle, and every one of them was covered. Every one of them. So I can't help the City of Hartford or any of our towns fix that problem. I need you to also help us help you. But that's not right. It's just not. And I've heard this for a long time. It's the MDC's fault. It's the MDC's fault. It's not. Yes, we've got our own faults, and we'll take those responsibilities and we'll make sure we fix them. But we can't fix that.
Mr. Chairman, I make several comments to what was just, I'll yield to Mr. Chairman. I know others speak.
Go ahead.
Shut you off.
The city has a regular program of sweeping streets, and we make extra concerted efforts in advance of forecast rains to go out and sweep streets in priority areas that are prone to flooding. So the characterization that Mr. Jellison made of the city's street sweeping activities is just not accurate. And frankly, it's a red herring to distract from the overall capacity issues the MDC system has. Secondly, the comment was made earlier about and I think it just bears correcting for the record that the city is responsible for the flood control system in the city of Hartford. That's something that is accurate insofar as that the flood control system reflects the river dike. You could, hearing that name, you might get the impression that that means flood control more broadly, such as street flooding. That's been the main topic of discussion this evening. The flood control system is a separate entity. Again, about the flood control system and the pumps that the city is responsible for maintaining, there are multiple redundant pumps. Some of those redundant pumps were taken offline in order to have regular routine repairs to ensure that they are ready to be put into use when they're required. And because we do that kind of maintenance regularly, sufficient pumps were available and online and operational during the July 4th storm.
Commissioner Curry and Commissioner Salemi following.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask, I had recently heard that there was a regional flood control commission, and Scott had just mentioned it. We've got a lot of bodies of people and organizations, municipalities, state agencies, neighborhood groups, all involved in this. And this is the first time I've heard anyone mention Regional Flood Control Commission. Can you, through you, Mr. Chair, Scott, can you obtain the last 24 months of their meeting minutes provided to the commissioners?
Sure. We can do that, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Salemi? Commissioner Salemi?
My question doesn't have to do with this, but just to sort of add to what Commissioner Curry has said, my understanding is that the Hartford Flood Control Commission has members from other towns on it. Bloomfield, West Hartford, Newington, and Weathersfield. Is Weathersfield too? Am I correct? So, and they're responsible for the Park River conduit. We're talking about Scott. My question. At this meeting, I thought that we were going to hear about the questions that came from the people in the North End that they wanted answered because they maybe don't understand all the issues that are here. But what you are, this is really a regional issue. It's really an issue for certainly way more than just the MDC and the city of Hartford. It's more than that. It's the Flood Control Commission, it's DEP. So one of the things that I think sometimes gets overlooked is most of Hartford's sewer system, let's just call it that for now, was built before there was a sewage treatment plant. So most of Hartford, some of the North End sewer system goes back to the 19th century. So the design and the materials and everything are from then. And combined sewers back then were actually a good thing because when it rained, it cleared out the sewage from the system that all wound up in the Connecticut River anywhere and from out here, East Hartford, all to the district. I've worked treatment plant. Bridgeport. Where do you think it went? Long Island Sound. New Haven, where do you think it went? Long Island Sound. And here, Springfield, Holyoke, went to Connecticut River, and so did ours. So I think looking at the history, this wasn't put together just by the city of Hartford, and I think that to expect the city to solve it by itself is way too much to expect, or the MDC to solve it by itself. But the Conlin Whitehead Highway, the conduit runs under it. And my family lived on Woodbridge Street. It was an open sewer. There was no conduit there. It was an open sewer in the 1930s and into the 40s. So I think not only the state of Connecticut, but the federal government in the past with the Army Corps of Engineers building dikes around Hartford and all these major infrastructure things being built by collectively the agencies and people that you talked about, Scott. And to expect us to solve, a problem with a system that was designed and built with an open end. It doesn't have an open end anymore. It doesn't have the Connecticut River anymore. The Park River conduit doesn't just go out into the Connecticut River anymore. When the river reaches flood stage, the sluice gates close, and you got to pump it over the top. Am I right about that? I mean, that's and all these things work that way. So, I think all flooding in Hartford. Now, and it's not just in Hartford. Cal said it's around the country. I grew up on Silver Lane in East Hartford, corner of Silver Lane, Brentmore Road, and my family was there for over 25 years. I never saw Silver Lane flooded, not once in all those years. But 2 weeks ago, or a little over 2 weeks ago, on that Friday, there are pictures from East Hartford where there's 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water over Silver Lane. So, I mean, that didn't just happen there. It happened all over Connecticut. It happened all over, certainly, central Connecticut, where it rained that hard. So, the sewer system and what we're doing to try to help the people in the north end by at least keeping the flood water out of their basement. That's about all we right now. That the big, flooding, and how much of it can we accept? Because we can't build a system big enough to make something like that go away real fast. By the way, the flooding on Silver Lane was gone in an hour and a half to 2 hours. It was gone. It's just the system couldn't handle that much rain at once. So, Scott, as far as the big is concerned, we have to find some way to put together, I don't know what you call it, some sort of task force with all these agencies working together to deal with what we expect to be more flooding in the future, and how are we going to handle that? And certainly the Park River conduit study, and how we get that off the ground. But I'm really knowing what, we're about to start work in the north end of Hartford. And I'm really interested in knowing as much as we possibly can and explaining that with as much detail to the people in the north end of Hartford. So, we can find what are the worst areas and try to prioritize them, do backflow preventers and lateral replacements in the worst parts of the north end first. And how do we let people know all about this, and how do we make this information available to them? And that's what I really expected to hear tonight. So I hope we can get to that,
Again,
part of this meeting.
could we move on to that issue that we want to understand what that process is going to be, which Scott can bring us up to?
Yeah, thank you. And
Because there's going to be a lot more debate on the issue that we just had.
Back on. Yep, plenty more slides where those come from. Thank you. So Scott Jellison again. So I'm not going to go through the detail here. We've talked about this numerous times. This is the new integrated plan. This is the approved plan by the board and DEEP. But what this basically shows is we were planning to do only $47 million in this general location under the original IP that was approved in 2022, September of 2022, by DEEP, and December of 22 by the board. This now represents $170 million, and we made a commitment. We made a commitment that we would not only increase. The DEEP asked us, what can you do to mitigate the impacts to flooding and sewage backups in these basements. Now, remember, our original consent order from the state of Connecticut did not identify backups in basements. It wasn't in the consent order. We were not mandated to do anything when it comes to basement backups. We did practically because that's where our backwater valve program comes from. But it wasn't mandated as part of the consent order. We included that as part of this 170 million so that we can now, again, remove the stormwater at the home, at the street, remove the root cause of the challenge rather than building big tunnels and collecting it at the river. And we made a commitment that we were going to do a bunch of the shaded areas are rehabbing, lining sewers. We also agreed, and the board approved, replacing laterals, lining laterals on private property, which we never did before. We're getting 50% grant for that work. And we also identified 5 specific streets. They wanted us to start digging in July. And we made the commitment that we would do that. We also voluntarily did something that's never been done before. The MDC has never, ever, ever required our contractors that are doing work for the MDC to utilize 30% Hartford resident workforce requirements. Never required. It's not allowed by DEEP and by EPA, won't allow it. They allowed us to do that. That was our idea. That was MDC's idea. We, in all of our contracts, our separation work and our lining projects and all of our private property work, which is going to be backwater valves and the laterals, all of those contractors that are bidding this work, they have to be certified by DAS. They have to follow the process of bidding. And if they are certified, if they're not certified, we'll help them get certified. But by doing that and bidding that work, we're going to get 50% grant for private property work, which we've never received before. And we said we'll be out there digging in July. This is our first street, Durham Street. We're doing the water main work prior to the sewer excavation and separation. So we did meet our goal. Our contractors are literally out there on Durham Street, and we're going to go to Woodstock next. So we've met a commitment, and I've said this before, but just think about an organization that planned for 6 years to do $47 million over a 10-year period, and then in 3 months we shifted gears and changed that to 170 million and said we'll be out digging in July. I don't think there's anybody else, any other organization but the MDC that could have done that, and we did it. So that's the status we have. There's about 24 homes on this street. We've got a presentation on 9E, which talks about the outreach, which I'll save for that. But we've been working with our outreach teams and with our construction teams to get those backwater valves in those homes, because to your point, Commissioner Slemmy, these are our priority. We've got to get these backwater valves in preparation for the separation work. We have, we had 2 public meetings, one in June and one in July, to get people to promote the backwater valve program, to make them understand what we're doing so that we can get into their home. We have some discussions about backwater valves. I don't know if you want to get into it, but it's a very important component of the project. And we have just, Kelly will talk about this, but we have hired, as we did in the past between 2008 and 2013, we hired 2 individuals through RFP for our public outreach as part of the project. They'll be working hand in hand with our staff to get the community and have the community understand what we're doing and what we need them to do, help them sign off on all of the required documents so that we can do that work on their private property. And so I'm not going to get into these issues. If you want talk about here's a really important component. I've mentioned this. I've sent a couple of emails around to the commissioners. The one thing that we have set a standard for ourselves is to say we want to hire as many Hartford-based contractors as we can. And they have to be certified. They have to be DAS certified. They have to be licensed and insured. DEEP will not reimburse us if we have contractors that are not certified by DAS. Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit about what you have done through the procurement process to try and recruit Hartford-based businesses, and not just Hartford-based businesses, but all of our towns and across the state?
Sure. Kelly Shane, Chief Administrative Officer. I'm here with our procurement staff too, who's worked really hard to recruit. And also our outreach staff who's going to come up and talk a little more about the 30% workforce requirements. But we've reached out over the last 3 months to like 35 different small and minority businesses, many of whom, well, some of whom are Hartford-based, those we could find. Plumbing firms, women-owned, small minority, not only in Hartford, but also our surrounding member towns and non-member towns in the surrounding area. We utilized the City of Hartford's plumbing contractor list. There were about 30 firms on that list. We used DAS certified firms, their list. We reached out personally. We've called them directly multiple times. We actually held a DAS certification. We partnered with DAS and we held back in June, and you may recall because we sent all the commissioners an email about our certification events with DAS. We're holding them at our training center. We're holding one a month. We had one in June. One in July. We have one in August, actually next week, and we have one per month through November, where we're helping small businesses get registered with DAS to become a small business, registered as minority businesses. And we issued our first backwater valve. Scott was talking about the backwater valve program. We need to bring our contractors on board so that we have the contractors to go into those homes and work with our customers to get those backwater valve systems in. We issued our first RFQ in late June, and we've held one informal and 2 formal pre-bid meetings, and it resulted in a pool of about 15 bidders, 2 of whom were Hartford specifically firms. And you may recall, John sent you all an email in early July letting you know about the pre-bid meetings and asking you to send out to any firms you may know that might be interested. We also met with and partnered with the Minority Construction Council. Chris and Jeff had spoken at their member meeting to tell them about the opportunities of our backwater valve, as well as our House Connection Program RFQ, which is going out shortly. And we ended up with a pool of 15 bidders, and of those 15 bidders, we had 9 bids come in for our first RFQ that went out. We're currently involved in evaluating those bids. We had 1 Hartford minority business apply, and 3 other member town firms apply of those 9. So we're currently evaluating those bids. Our plan is to go back out to bid early September again for the backwater valve firms. And Jeff's going to talk specifically about some firms he's talked to that weren't able to make the first round but are still very interested. Hartford firms specifically, I think, Jeff, that he can talk about directly if you'd like, about those firms that are going to bid as well.
You just add the requirements of the 30% requirement for those contracts?
Yes. So all the contracts that we're bidding out, talking about, where was it that you were just showing the picture of? Which street?
Durham Street.
Durham Street. The other bids, we have our sewer repair contracts that we modified. Our contract, we worked directly with DEEP. We modified those contracts. And as Scott mentioned, we work with DEEP to add not only the 30% workforce, local workforce, Hartford resident workforce requirement to the backwater valve, the house connection RFQ, all the work that we're doing in North Hartford, we're adding that 30% workforce requirement. That's all hours worked on each of the projects. There's a 30% up to a minimum requirement of a 30% workforce goal, if you will. But we've met with all of our contractors, our current large contractors, and they're jumping in and ready to support. Jeff can talk more about how he's getting the workforce through different workforce, community workforce programs together with our contractors. With our large construction contracts, we're looking at 6% minority business participation and 5% women-owned, reverse that, 5% minority business participation and 6% women-owned, but also that 30% local workforce participation, and that's numbers of hours worked on each project with a local Hartford resident workforce. So we're really working hard to make sure that we bring together not only the community and the workforce, but also the contractors to support the work locally.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman, and just part of my question, that was still my question. I know, but I want to ask about the outreach program. That's what I asked about. So, and I appreciate what you told me. I mean, I'm very familiar with the program, okay, and with the percentage requirements. I'm also familiar with how hard this is to do in Hartford, and even just in Greater Hartford. It's very hard to do. But my question too was about reaching this community now, and I think that this is, it's good that we're looking for 30% participation for the community. But, when we started the tunnel and the program started to reveal that, we were going to need easements from people that own property in the area and everything, we established a satellite office on Franklin Avenue. And it was my understanding that made it, that actually reached people, that people actually came to that office, and, some people with very mistaken ideas about what we were doing with this tunnel, but also people that needed to know what we were doing. I think this is, since we're actually going on private property, there we were only like trying to find the homeowners and do this thing. We're looking to go on private property and do work on private property. It would seem to me that we could benefit, in understanding what the community needs, and that the community could benefit tremendously from someone being there, in a satellite office where you could walk to this office or drive to the office and, get a better understanding of what's happening in the neighborhood. I haven't heard that we're doing anything like that yet, but I know you said you hired 2 people for outreach.
Yes.
So I think that, we ought to be looking at where we might be able to put them. So
if I may, thank you, Commissioner. You're asking the right questions. But so when we talk about outreach, it's not just outreach, right? The procurement piece is part of outreach.
I understand.
And the next gentleman, Jeff King, is going to talk about the matchmaking with our contractors to make sure that our contractors are complying with the 30% requirement. And then the next group that's going to talk behind them is going to be our outreach team. So this is a team effort. It's not just our outreach team that's out there doing something. Our engineers, our construction people, the procurement people, Jeff's compliance team with Biviana, who's the manager of it. We sit in this room every Wednesday and talk about these projects. So this is the outreach that we're talking about. This is just the procurement component. If I could let Jeff talk, and then the outreach team.
Commissioner Patel, you had a question.
Item rate contract or lump sum contract?
I'm sorry, item or lump sum? Yeah, so we, in certain cases, we have unit prices, and then we have lump sum contracts for like the excavation work. The one way that we were able to dig on July, everybody said, we want you out there digging in July. We said, no problem. But we needed, and you all were documented on this, we needed DEEP to rip up bureaucracy. And so what we said to DEEP was, we can do that, but you got to let us use our on-call contractors. We have 3 of them, and we use them for all of our sewer repair, but we don't follow the exact process that you would follow to get a contract bid and approved through DEEP. So we had to work, Kelly and the staff had to work to get DEEP to a point where they would accept those contracts. They did. And so we take those 3 on-call contractors and we have them bid against each other. We say, here's a project on Durham, give us a price. And then we select off of the 3 based on those unit prices. So we had to get that approved from DEEP. On the backwater valve programs, we'll use unit prices to make sure that everybody is charging a fair price and not gouging our customers. We've got examples of people gouging our customers, and we're trying to avoid that.
Honestly, except for a few allowance items, everything is fixed price, unit prices. Yep. Some we set and some the contractors compete.
Yeah, Jeff King, if he could just talk about yes, thank you, Kelly.
All right.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jeff King, construction manager. So 30%, it's a difficult goal, but I think we can do it, right? I come from a minority contracting family, so I know the baseline as far as getting your certification, right? We have to go out and look for contractors on DAS, and those contractors, they get their financial statement in line, they make sure they're insured, they put a package together that the state reviews, and that's how they get their WMBE certification. So we go in that database, we cold call all of them, right? We've had Kennedy's Plumbing, who's a Hartford contractor. She's not able to have any more technicians to do plumbing work, so she is not putting a bid together. We had All Point Plumbing, they're a Hartford minority contractor. They put a bid together. We had contractors who just were busy and couldn't make the deadline, so we reached back out to them after the bids were due, and they're going to make a commitment if we give them another opportunity to put a bid in. So we have MCM Mechanical, they're a Hartford contractor. They will put a bid in. Thanks. Yep, so MCM, AK Mechanical, they're a Hartford contractor, but they aren't DAS certified, so we'll be working with them so they can put their package together and become DAS certified. And we have, sorry about that, let me get my list here. And we also have John's Plumbing. So John's Plumbing, he was an original backwater valve contractor. He was busy, but I talked to John actually this weekend, and he's looking for an opportunity to put a bid in. So we'll get John's Plumbing back into the mix as far as getting a Hartford contractor. So, when you look at the backwater valves, it's not a huge crew, right? You're looking at maybe like a 1 or 2 person operation. So if we can get those 4 contractors from Hartford work, I think, you get 100% participation from that front, right? Going back to 2009 when we started all this work, we had a lot of contractors that were hiring people in the area. So you have Coastline Construction that has a team of Hartford employees already. You have VMS, they have Hartford employees already. You have Paramount Construction, they have Hartford employees already. So we've asked those guys to just reshuffle their deck, right? To put a team together that lives in Hartford and can do the work and get those teams out there so that we can hit those goals. If we're looking at a 4 to 5 man crew doing lining, we need 2 people to be on that crew that are Hartford residents. So we're doing just the old school approach, just doing those cold calls and building those relationships. The other ways we're gonna hit those goals are just kind of through 3 other fronts, right? We want to do like a workforce development program, which we're doing that right now. We're working with Jeff Cathcart. He is the program coordinator for the Connecticut Pre-Apprenticeship Program. So Jeff has a lot of relationships with just working with youth, working with Hartford schools and getting kids opportunities already. We've had one person, Nathiba Cooper. He was a Hartford High School graduate. He was working in the tunnel, and he's did a great job out there. So we're trying to just do something organically so we can get those relationships and get people in contact with contractors who want to hire people. You have people that are eagerly looking for people. They're out here putting ads in the paper. They're trying to find people, and we're just helping to bridge that gap through using these relationships. So we're doing the organic way of calling contractors and building those relationships. We're tapping into workforce development with Jeff Cathcart. And then we're also just getting out there and doing traditional networking, right? We had National Night Out, which was last week, Tuesday. They actually had a probation stand there. So I reached out to those individuals that are running probation. to let them know that there are opportunities for prisoner reentry programs and contractors that want to train people that are just looking to work hard. So I'll be contacting those people so we can find any individuals from Hartford that are looking for job opportunities and get them over to the Beauvairs, the Coastlines, the Paramounts that are just looking to train hardworking people. We're also very involved with the Greater Hartford African American Alliance. I've been going to their weekly meetings on Saturdays. Colin Dawkins, he's a member of the Minority Construction Council. He's very active there. And we're just staying in contact, right? Letting people know these are our mandatory pre-bids. These are when our due dates are due for bids, and just making sure we let contractors know who are certified and capable and qualified that we're coming out to bid with backwater valve programs, house connection programs, and just making sure we keep people engaged so that we can get that bidding participation. So if there are any questions.
Can you just add to that Cathcart's role with DOT and the apprentice program with the high school?
Yeah, so with the Connecticut Technical Education and Career Systems, they have what they call a work-based learning program. So that's when they're able to use juniors and seniors for working opportunities. So if we contact each dean of each of the schools, so we're looking at EC Goodwin, Prince Tech, and Cheney Tech, because those are the three local schools in Hartford, East Hartford, and New Britain. If we're pulling from those pools, those are where we're going to get those Hartford kids that are in school for either plumbing. They have some bioscience degree majors, electrical. So they have that work-based learning program, and it starts off this September. We're going to reach out to those deans and see if they can find students that are in the plumbing programs or just kids that want to get into the wastewater treatment or water treatment business and make those matchmaking opportunities. So we'll get the parents on board, obviously. We'll get the deans on board. We'll make sure these kids are meeting the grade requirements. I believe they need to have like a 70% grade average, and get them signed up with contractors and get them interviewed so we can pull some Hartford students from these three schools to be trained from the contractors who have bidded and the contractors who will bid once you go back out to bid with more bidding opportunities. So,
Jeff and Viviana. Is Viviana here? Hi, Viviana. So Viviana is our manager of project controls. So her job, and Jeff's going to be in the field, making sure these contractors are complying with this requirement. And Viviana's job is to keep track of it, make sure all of our contracts are complying with that 30% requirement. Now, it's a goal, just like the city of Hartford's, it's a goal. But we believe, based on our conversations with our contractors, that we will meet the 30% on all of our contracts we're bidding. Thank you, Jeff.
We make a spreadsheet, just so you know. We have a monthly spreadsheet that has tabs for each month, and we've tied those spreadsheets to their pay requisitions. So whenever those monthly pay apps come in, they have to submit those spreadsheets that track their workforce. We break it down through ethnicity, who's in Hartford, who's in the local area, so that we can stay on top of this, right? We want to be able to say, okay, these people are hitting the goals, we're at 30%, we're at 50%, and just monitor that on a month-to-month basis so that we can just readjust wherever we need to readjust, whether it's calling Jeff Cathcart, whether it's attending MCC meetings, whether I'm getting calls from a lot of people saying, I heard MDC's hiring. I'm trying to mentor a few kids that are looking for opportunities that are from Hartford so that, they can get their OSHA 10 training, they can get their flagger certification, they can do whatever they can do to just show us that they're able or willing and looking for an opportunity and try to get those numbers through just creating those opportunities. So I think we can do it. It's going to be a tough battle, but we'll get it done.
Thank you.
Easy, Mr. Chair. Just a quick second. Thank you. Jeff, thanks for that presentation. I really appreciate it. I would just also recommend that you get in touch with Stephen Haynes over at Open Hearth. He runs a workforce and they do OSHA 10 training over there. They've got a whole workforce crew over there. And I'd highly recommend to contact somebody over there. And then I've had wonderful relationships with people over at OPP and the workforce development that they've got some of the young men and women doing over there through OPP. So I just highly recommend that you reach out to both of those organizations to just cast a broader.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the lead. So if anyone has those, those type of contacts and relationships, definitely have them call me and we can work to make that happen.
Commissioner Anderson.
You, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of things, two-part question. Number one is that I spoke to a contractor, and they're very busy. And you had spoke about coming back. One of them spoke to two contractors. One was John, who's extremely busy because he's a good contractor. And then there's another one who's minority woman owned and Hartford base. But she was talking about the salary, number one, and then number two, that she's already on so many jobs. So, I mean, they're that good. I'll give you her name and number. Because she wants to do it. They want to sit down and do it, put it in a bid, but they're already currently engaged because they're good. All your good ones are going to be on jobs.
And we've said this before, commissioners. Plumbers and electricians are hard to come by right now. It's just the nature of the beast. And we've got to find, we have said in all of our presentations, and that's what Jeff is doing, if you know of a young man or a woman who is an apprentice through whatever program, whether it's a Hartford-based program, but they have the ability to work on these projects, we will vet them and find a place for them to work. We definitely need as much help in the outreach as we can, and that's where Jeff comes in, and our two outreach teams are going to be helping us with that as well.
Second part question, Chairman, through you, sir, if I may. The other part was, speaking of outreach, look at Janice Castle at the City of Hartford. Because now we're talking about let's get a better relationship with working with the city. I think this would be a good olive branch to start that building of a stronger relationship with the city.
I know Janice very well. I attend the monthly NRZ meetings.
Yeah, because she's connected. She knows a lot of. Yeah.
We are talking about the jobs that are going out and opportunities. So I'll see what information Janice has, and we'll use that too.
And then my last question was, I attended both of the meetings in North and Hartford, and the last meeting at KDA, Calvin D. Anderson, there were more staff than residents. Right. What is our strategy for getting the word out to the residents? I've done a couple of my friends next door neighbors kind of thing, but what do we go? Do we go local community newspaper? What can we do to let folks know that we are doing the evaluations? I had mine done. I signed up as John Q. Public, so they didn't know I was a commissioner. And that went very well. The visit was great. They told me what I need to do, and they're coming back. I received a letter in the mail indicating they'll be coming back. I'm on Tower Ave in Hartford. Yeah. So that's going to happen, but I try to knock on a couple of doors of my fellow residents and neighbors. Got to get the word out. What can we do?
And
the outreach groups for that, maybe do.
Yeah. So Julie's going to come up and talk next about the next steps, which is exactly going to answer that question.
Civic Association I'm hearing about.
Was that
Civic Association? No.
The confusion part of Blue Hill Civic, it was named in the legislation, and the meeting that we just had today, Crystal, myself, and the chairman, their role, based on the comptroller's understanding, and I think we all agree, the role of Blue Hill Civic is not to communicate relative to MDC's projects. It's relative to communicating about this $5 million flood reimbursement program. So that's all they're going to be doing. But our team, Julie and Nick, and our two outreach teams will be the ones that are going to be reaching out, knocking on doors, trying to facilitate. Julie can talk about this. I'll let her talk, and you'll see what we're doing. I know Commissioner Salemi talked about having offices. Lessons learned. So when we did the tunnel, we had offices. When we did separation work from 2008 to 2013, we had offices. But our consultants, our outreach teams, are telling us that the people want to hear from you in their home. They want you to knock on the door and talk to you, and they don't want to go to an office. They want our outreach teams to go to their home. We're actually having outreach on Durham, right on the street, setting up a tent, talking about the backwater valve programs, educating people about what we're doing. But Julie, why don't you...
Before you get into that, we got one more question. Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Lewis.
Chairman, thank you for your presentation, Jeff. I would also like to recommend Building Trades Training Institute as a resource. The participants in that program already come certified, including OSHA 10. So you don't have to do any training. They're trained and certified by the program and are ready to. Formerly the Jobs Funnel, and the Jobs Funnel was written into the PLAs for the City of Hartford as a resource for people to help them to meet their 30% goal. So I will give you the contact information.
Okay. I can give my business card to anyone who wants my contact information. So if you have any people you want to send my way, that'd be great.
Julie? Go ahead.
Good evening. To address Commissioner Slemmy's question about the outreach offices, I did speak with Corinne about that as well as Scott. We found, as Scott has said too, with lessons learned, that most of the people really wanted us to come to their home. We had outreach offices for many years on Franklin and Albany. We spent a lot of money to have them there. So as of right now, we don't think that they're necessary, especially in some of the smaller project areas. That could change. If we're told to open them, we will. But I just don't think at this point that they're probably going to be needed. Our goal is to be as present in the community daily, so they won't need to come to an outreach office because they'll have someone to contact, which is why let me start at the beginning. Let me start over. We went through the RFQ process to hire the 2 outreach firms. We have Moody Consulting and Strategic Outreach Solutions. And I did this 15 years ago for sewer separation. I didn't need glasses then. I do need them now. So we'll start here. Both are qualified firms. They are community-based, and they're experienced because they did this work with us before. We need this outreach support because specifically for sewer separation project areas, it's a higher level of coordination that takes place for sewer separation. On your property more, we're in your basement more, we're doing things to your plumbing that we need sign-offs, we need your cooperation, we need your understanding. So it's very important that we have people there, these community outreach groups, and our staff as well, Nick, Angel Morales, who work in our department. So they have someone they can connect with. We want to build a relationship while we're in the community and make them feel like they know what's happening every step of the way. We communicate, how we do this is we set up stakeholder lists. We know every person that we're communicating with in the neighborhood. We coordinate in addition, we coordinate with every member town, the City of Hartford. We talk to Janice Castle regularly, Frank Della Ripa. They have all of the notices that we send out. In fact, I think that weekly or monthly maybe, Janice sends everything out in her reports so that we're very well connected with what's going on. How we communicate with the community is through various means and methods. We are in your community doing meetings on the street. We hold community meetings like we did in June and July for bigger groups. We do materials, leave behinds, door-to-door notices, mailings, email, text messaging, and as I said before, we assign someone specific to the project so someone has somebody they can talk to anytime. Our goal always in doing community outreach is the following. We want everyone to know what's coming and how long we're going to be there, what will happen during construction, what changes and improvements are going to happen to their property, and how will that affect them. They want to know what they're going to be left with when the construction process is over and we've left their house, what they need to do to maintain any fixture change that we've done, adding sump pumps, backwater valves, check valves, which is all part of that display that you see there. It's an example. And who's responsible for what when you leave? As Scott has said before, we can stop sewage from backing up into your basement through these programs. We can't necessarily stop your basement from getting wet from storm water that can still get in through various means, cracks in your foundation, leaky windows, connections into your basement that maybe not be protected. And then we stay with you throughout the duration of the project through restoration and at least 1 year afterwards, because that's usually when the contractor has to make sure grass is reestablished and that everything is working properly. So in a nutshell, that's what.
So so to the question of Commissioner Salemi, we had to go through a process. We had to go through an RFP process, which took time. We just finalized and signed those contracts really last week. So the first street was Durham. So as Julie mentioned, our staff did the majority of that work, legwork. Our staff has done this. Angel's been with us for 3 years now. He's done all of this kind of work. Jeff King used to be on our outreach team, but now he's dealing with this compliance issue. So Jeff is, in a sense, multitasking on those levels. And Julie and Nick have been doing this with our staff since 2008. Now, what we will do is, as we bring on our consultants, which will really start next week, we've already had our consultants at our meetings, at least at the last meeting, which was very helpful. But we will have our consultants will be, I believe, Janice lives in the community. Does Crane live in the community? Two. So these two individuals have done this before for the MDC during the 2008 to 2013 separation. Two Black African American women that live in these communities and have already done this for the MDC. Who better to have outreach than from these two individuals? So we're lucky to have them, and they will be the face of the MDC. We want our outreach teams to know everything our technical people know, because they better understand how to communicate that technical jargon to a homeowner that they know that lives on that street. There will be meetings. Corinne and Janice will be going to homes, talking to groups of people, going to these public meetings at NRZ meetings. We try to get to the NRZ meetings on a regular basis. I know Nikki's going to talk about that. So our outreach teams are not, they've done this before. Our team here has done this before. When we did the tunnel, we stopped and got away from separation. So the outreach was less complicated. You're really talking about, one intersection that might be affected over a period of time. And that, we didn't need the door-to-door knocking so much, except for the easements and those kinds of things that had to occur. It's a lot of work. But our outreach teams will be the ones helping us get the signatures to these documents that we need to do, to get authorized to do the private property on your home. Nikki, you got?
Just a couple of things. I don't want to repeat anything Julie said, but the current version of the integrated plan that you all approved on the July 12th was really unprecedented. So as you're talking about what happened with the tunnel and even the separation years ago, the need to communicate those efforts and the differences of what we're now doing as part of this project is greater. So she sort of talked about the what, or how we go out and meet with folks and do outreach. And I kind of want to talk about what we're giving people, what information, how are we giving, to Commissioner Anderson's question, how are we getting this out there? So just to answer your point quickly, any of our construction notices that go out for the city of Hartford and all of our towns really, for Hartford, they go to Janice Council. If you look at her weekly, e-blast, there's an MDC section every week of what projects we have going on. They basically paste our flyers right in there. So this work that's taking place will be part of what we do, but we're already hooked into the city. They get regular updates for that kind of thing. So I just wanted to mention that quickly. But that's a good example. So in e-blast, using the media, using websites, social media, brochures, FAQs, handouts, a list, different formats. And I guess it's more important to say we understand that there's a range of communication, right? A meeting on a street, whether we do a pop-up tent on the side of the street where we're doing separation work with a tent and a table with a construction staff, Angel, that's different than meeting in a NRZ meeting where you're part of somebody else's agenda, and we have work going on in their area, right? So we kind of curtail it a little bit differently, where you're item 11 on an agenda, we're in your town, we're in your neighborhood, this is why we're going to be there, this is what we're going to do when we're going to be there. But we're in the process now of creating both new and updating existing materials, both print digital web to communicate just the new programs, like more, and what's different about the backwater valve than was 6 months ago and what we're doing now, and keeping in mind while designing them to make this straightforward and easy for MDC customers to understand. We're not giving them a PowerPoint, we're not giving them a document to read. We've got to make it simple. That's why the video that you saw but didn't hear was a way that we do that. And we have probably like 4 or 5 in design right now to support each leg of what we're trying to do out there with outreach.
And just remember what everyone that talked about the procurement, about the outreach, about the matchmaking, remember, none of that was going to happen prior to changing the integrated plan in July. So our staff is working 24/7. The guys in operations made these backwater valve exhibits over the weekend. I mean, the amount of work that's been put in to actually start digging in July is unprecedented. To talk about the man hours, the woman hours that were put in to actually get to where we are none of this work was expected. We were only going to be lining and doing some point repair in the North Hartford area over the 10-year period. We had to change the way in which we were going to do that work, and all of the work we're talking about is new and unexpected based on the recent changes we've made with Deep and North Hartford.
Maybe one thing to add to that, Scott, is important to what the community tells us what to come to as well. We have all our ideas. We want to do this and that. It's important to listen to what they say. A perfect example, for a week ago, we went to, I feel like it was August 1st, the National Night Out in both Goodwin and in the Blue Hills area, and we actually had our utility services staff there, just at kind of like a block party type event, with a table and a computer, signing up people for backwater valve assessments right there, with a host of other information that we gave out. But it was, I think, more important to have the staff that books the appointments and talks to you about the appointments right there and accessible to them. That made it easier, and that's what we've been doing for
scooters.
And some scooters. They're available to do anything they needed us to do at that event.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Nick and Julie. So that is the outreach component. We're going backwards to 2008, which is what we did in separation work from 2008, 2013. We want to do this everywhere in Hartford, everywhere in West Hartford, everywhere in East Hartford. We believe that getting the stormwater out of the lateral and replacing the lateral with a new lateral is the best thing for our towns and for the MDC as a whole. And what we're hoping is that Deep's going to agree that this model that we're doing in North Hartford is the solution. And I know the chairman talks about 1978 all the time and about the 80% rule and how the feds used to give 80% to the sewer. Well, if this works, and Deep says, we never gave you 50% grant money for private property work before, but now we're going to because of the success of North Hartford projects, we just got back 50% of the 80%. So we're going to get money for not just Hartford, but for North Hartford, for all of Hartford and all of our other towns. And I do believe, I've said this before, I do believe that Deep staff and EPA staff realize that we're right and that stormwater was the problem. And so hopefully we can move forward. And but the staff has done an amazing job getting us to where we are so we can have excavators digging on Durham Street in July when we started talking about this in April. Well, I already did. I talked about meeting with the comptroller, Mr. Scanlon, and so we have a plan and process to moving forward. We are named in the legislation. We have to be part of the solution. I don't want to be part of the solution, but we have to be, because if we're not, we don't want MDC to get blamed for something that is not our fault. There's a lot of implications to that. Never mind the money aspect of it. But remember, every time we're at fault with a sewer collapse or a water main break that causes damage to a home, we pay. We reimburse we make the home habitable. And if there's damage like Lynbrook, where you actually, our contractor created the problem, we're more than liable for habitable. We're responsible for private property damage as well. We've got to coordinate with this new program. We want to make sure that we're not blamed for something, because if we suggest under our claims process that we're not responsible, and then someone else decides we are, that could have implications to EPA and to DEEP. I mean, we could be fined. So we have to be engaged in this process. We're being told by the Comptroller's office we will be reimbursed. We're going to have to hire a person who can be a claims adjuster. We don't have that expertise on site. We determine whether or not it was the sewer system or not the sewer system. And then we have contractors, if it's our fault, we have contractors give us pricing to fix what's broke. And that's the extent of our adjustment process. But there'll be circumstances in this case where people are going to be talking about their roofs are damaged and their gutters are damaged and there's foundation drain problems and sinkholes in their backyard. That has nothing to do with the MDC. So we want to make sure that that blame is correctly pointed to whether, if it is our responsibility, we'll accept the responsibility for it. We're being told that even if it is our responsibility, the $5 million will be applicable. So the MDC could save money on this. We want to make sure, as we talked about with this program here with the North Hartford, we want to make sure that we don't have our customers taken advantage of. There have been a number of circumstances over the years and more recently where contractors have tried to take advantage of our customers. And there's a number of instances where we've, had contractors telling, they're not certified through DAS, they're not certified through the MDC, telling our customers that, they're going to do this work for them and it's going to cost $40,000. And then we get involved and find out it's only 12. And so we don't want our customer base to be taken advantage of. I think the comptroller is as concerned about that. There's going to be a lot of people. The governor's going to make an announcement on the 10th, which is Thursday. And as soon as that announcement is made, they're going to be inundated with calls. And applications are going to start flowing. So there's going to be a lot of people looking for restitution. We've got to just build that process, that bureaucratic process internally with the comptroller's office to make sure that we are doing the right thing. We're protecting the MDC, and the state's as concerned about this as we are. So
remember that this statute is retroactive to 2021, so
right.
It's going to be a significant. Commissioner Holloway?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I have a question to Scott. When you go into a home and you find, for instance, you have one right now where there is a senior who needs a sump pump. However, her electrical needs to be upgraded and she doesn't have the money to do that. How are we going to help her? Because your staff said it is necessary. She must have a sump pump.
Yeah.
Electrical cannot accommodate it. So how are we going to help those people in those seniors?
Yeah. Okay, so it's a great question, and not just in Hartford, but it's a challenge to deal with seniors in general because they don't have some homeowners don't even go in their basement. I've had these instances occur all across the district. Elderly people in their family, they either have family or they're remote, and no one wants to deal with a sump pump or a backwater valve, so they just don't get it. So we're in terms of upgrading. I don't know the specifics of that, but in terms of the electric upgrade to the building in order to provide a sump pump, I don't know the specifics of it. We would typically do all the electrical to install that sump pump. So I can't imagine that there's not enough capacity in a home to provide power to that sump pump. But I'll look at the address if you like. The other challenge we're going to have, Commissioner, is I got a letter from Ms. Rodriguez from CRT. And she was a very nice woman, and she explained to me a scenario that is occurring on Garden Street, and it's one of the housing units for the housing authority. And this, one of the last buildings is down at the bottom of the hill, and there's 10 apartments in it. It's slab on grade. The building, the sewer system is lower than the manhole in Garden Street. So by the plumbing code, that's illegal, right? But it's there. And she received bids in 2021 for $80,000 and for $15,000 for different things. Those are going to be challenges. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to try and find a solution for a property that is not built to code. We always talk about the Muse. The Muse is a nightmare of mine from way back. So we're going to have to try and find solutions, creative solutions. It's almost very difficult to put a backwater valve in an apartment building with 10 apartments and there's no basement. So that's, yes.
And those are some of the questions that I am getting.
Right.
These things are clay.
Right. Yes.
So how are you going to address those issues when you get there?
We're gonna. It's complicated, but we're going to do everything we can to accommodate that development. What we need is what we need. Let's not create any more of those, right? It's not just Hartford. I'm not picking on Commissioner Stewart right now. Every one of our towns have to comply with their own. This is a state and national plumbing code, right? This is an MDC. This is a state and national building code. Bud Salemi, Commissioner Salemi, Plumber Salemi would understand this and knows this. You got to build a building to standard code, right? You can't expect the sewer company to solve something that's insolvable when a building was built below the sewer system and there was no backwater valves installed in 1998 when it was, right, whatever it was. So we're gonna do our best, and we'll do everything we can to help.
And those are some of the challenges you're going to find
Right.
in North Hartford.
Great. And that exists in Weathersfield and Newington as well. It's not just Hartford that this exists, but we've got to recognize we're going to do everything we can, and we'll figure out a way to fix it.
Okay. Further questions?
Chairman, follow up to Gene's question was once we get the backwater or the sump pump into a house with elderly people, particularly, I know my father was in his 90s, he never went down those stairs, I wouldn't allow it. How are they going to maintain that system after that?
Yeah, it's going to be part of our outreach program.
And that's a good point. And I have said this at both of our outreach meetings. You don't buy a car and then expect someone else to change the oil, right? You have a personal responsibility. I've had customers from Weathersfield call me up. The gentleman calls me up. He's in Boston. His mother's in Weathersfield. She's an elderly woman, and he didn't want a backwater valve because he says, I'm in Boston. She is not going in the basement. So if it floods, it floods. And that's the way they handle it. I don't think that's the right solution, but we've got to educate our customers when they accept this equipment. There's a personal responsibility that goes with it. And they've got to have some way of checking on a regular basis to make sure that their infrastructure is operable. It's just the way it's got to be. I mean,
that's all going to be part of going through this process.
Sure.
And maybe as a condition of closing, that it's an obligation is transferred with the property, just like other things that you make a commitment for.
Yeah.
But for those people that can't do it, we're going to have an outreach program to assist. And for those people that don't know how to do it, there's going to have to be help to do that. That's all going to be part of this outreach process.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Chairman.
Further questions? Commissioner Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Andy, that's a great question. Chairman Salemi posed that same question to me today on how we're going to take care of that. And CNG has a great program, and certainly would not be or would be considered that we're putting plumbing contractors on approved lists. So we could possibly set up a yearly maintenance program where we could utilize those plumbers through our approved list and let them go out every year, and it could be paid for and attached to the customer's bill on a monthly prorated basis. But my question is, and Scott had mentioned, we're getting back 50% of the 80%. Our congressional delegation is doing a great job preserving the past, preserving history, but we really need to focus on the future. And people say, and you hear it, and you should hear it, and believe it, that as goes Hartford, so goes the region. And I believe that to be true. What are we doing? We've got lobbyists down there. Are we contacting our congressional delegation, seeking assistance with funding for these programs? We know there's not a commissioner here, but from whatever town you're from, this is not going to be paid for through ad valorem fees. It's an impossibility. So the state and MDC needs a lot of help in this area.
Commissioner, we've had some contact, and Chris will relate it quickly, with our lobbyists in Washington. But you're right, this is a national problem. It's going to require a national response. We've got flooding all over the country. In the major cities, they have the same problem we have because of the way they've taken care of infrastructure in the country. So that's going to be all part of an ongoing process. But Chris, why don't you just briefly?
We had a meeting that was set up last week for this morning between myself and Steve and our federal lobbyists, and with the good news about, if there is any good news from Washington about this being a national problem, is it's got national attention. The bad news is that there's a lot more people looking for the same dollars that we're going to be looking for. So it's going to be a fight for the money. There's 2 new programs that just came out last week, one of which is not terribly significant. It's about $200 million nationwide. It's a grant program that, oddly enough, originates from federal DOT, and it has to do with road infrastructure, stormwater, etc., serving underdeveloped or under. I don't want to say it's underutilized communities. I forget the language that they specifically use, but it would fit into Hartford certainly, and perhaps other towns within the MDC. But the bottom line is there's some money out there. There's another program that came out around the same time, a little heftier, $3.1 billion for that same type of infrastructure money, which we would be eligible for. They've suggested that, and the deadline for filing that, is September 28th. 2023. It's not a first come first serve. It's on an as needed basis. So they'll receive all the applications. There's a deadline. Then they'll evaluate those applications. One of the couple things we got going for us, certainly there are events that have occurred over the past several months, if not years, in the north end of Hartford. We've got if we partnered with the city. And the state DOT, it's more likely that we favorably, because they're addressing many potential recipients in one application, and it's all going to the same place. And obviously, our initial ask would be for infrastructure improvements to the city, including some significant stormwater infrastructure improvements, pipes up Blue Hills Avenue, stormwater pipe on Blue Hills Avenue, Albany Avenue, a tower. Those are the 3 that at least I can recall off the top of my head that really need some improvement in the infrastructure to accept the stormwater once it gets from private property onto the streets. So there's some opportunities there which we plan on applying for. I'll keep you posted on that. But that's just the toe in the water for the federal government, right? So we'll continue to monitor it. Our people are on it every day for us. We've just received. They brought back earmarks, so we received the $2.5 million earmarks for. Have nothing to do with stormwater, but other projects that we're engaged in to improve our system. A redundant water pipe from here to East Hartford, and improvements to our sludge handling facility down the South Meadows. But I'm sure there'll be other opportunities that we can take advantage of. So you just got to keep an eye on where the money is. This popped up just a week ago. The two programs I just talked about, at least to me, and I assume to our lobbyists as well. So, and the other thing that we've been able to do is largely through Scott and his people is to reprioritize the Clean Water Project to get a significant amount of money from upwards of $80 million grant on the program that we've discussed tonight. So we're working on getting the grant money. Often, it also on the other side also comes with low interest loans, but we're really concentrating on the grant money. And some of the programs are reimbursement for once you complete the work. Other programs are payments upfront for the work. And I think these two federal programs I just described are for government entities that have shovel-ready products, shovel-ready projects. Where certainly, if any entity can put together a shovel-ready project in a relatively short period of time, based upon events like Durham Street and getting shovels in the ground on the Clean Water Project within a matter of months, it would be the MDC. So we'll keep you posted, but we plan on applying for those grants.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Commissioner Torres.
I get anxious every time I hear about how we piecemeal our approach to dealing with Congress and trying to get some dollars and that sort of thing. When in fact we know that this is a national emergency, and I think that all politics is local. But I think it's incumbent upon organizations and agencies like the MDC that have credibility, that have the science behind it, that have the engineering behind it, to make a statement at least to our leadership, in Congress, to alert them that they need to address this not in a piecemeal manner, that this has to be addressed, on a broader scale. It's like the Marshall Program, or under Truman and Eisenhower, or the New Deal, under Franklin. This is a real major issue that has the potential not only to look at the future of this nation, and its greatness, if we want to continue to be a great nation with a great infrastructure, or not. And I would hope that that we would be able to make that kind of a statement, and urge others to do the same, because we can't continue to go after these dollars piecemeal at a time when we have these major issues that have to be resolved. Just
Mr. Chairman, I just one question. Are there any options like for the valves if they fail? Is there like a option of audible signal or something like that? Especially for elderly people, who are not visiting the basements, at all. Something like that. I mean, I think just looking from perspective of spending more money once it fails, now you have to go back and correct it and all that stuff. So.
If I may, Scott Shelton, there is leak detection that you can actually, a lot of home security systems, you can actually put detection on the floor that will sense water. I think we could we could provide alarm systems for sump pumps. The challenge is, it's really difficult to manage someone's home for them. It's a challenge to get them, if they aren't aware they're vacationing in Florida, during the winters. But we can look at some of those kinds of alarms for sure.
Other questions?
Thank you. To the point that was made to the previous speaker, about the kind of the risk of, I suppose, piecemeal pursuing of federal grant funding. I mean, there's no question in my mind that in order to truly solve the stormwater issues that we have in Hartford, that we're going to need to bring substantial federal resources to bear, and all kinds of stakeholders are going to have to be involved in that, from the MDC to the city of Hartford, to the state of Connecticut, and to our federal government in order to truly solve the problem. But there's really no organization on planet Earth that's better positioned than the MDC to look at MDC's system and to have it has both the experience with the system and the engineering expertise necessary in order to really evaluate that system and lay out what it would take to truly build a system that's more robust. It was said earlier that that we can't really build a system that can withstand a 200-year storm, and yet we have seen that regularly, on a regular basis now, we're seeing these 150-year storms. So I have to think that that it is possible to build a system if we can identify the right engineering solutions, we approach it in a thoughtful manner, and we identify how to do it in a cost-effective way. But in order to bring that to fruition, we need to have a kind of a master plan of attack, like a 10-year plan for making the system more robust. And we have to have that laid out in detail and have ready to go piecemeal, so that when grant opportunities do come up, because it's hard to predict when they will come up, to the points kind of just raised, we have to be ready to spring into action and leap on that. And I think that's something that I'd like to see a lot more discussion about around this table in the months ahead. How do we put that kind of master plan together to really get this problem, to take it by the horns and really make meaningful progress, so that people don't have to break out in a cold sweat every time that it rains, because that's really where we are these days. Every time that we see a storm, almost every week, folks are afraid of having their basements flood, and that's just an untenable situation. We can't ask people to live like that forever, and we need an action plan, and we have to be ready when the resources do materialize. So I think that planning job is, I think, incumbent upon us as the MDC to take on and to own.
It's not.
Just really quick.
Amanda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to bring up a couple of points that have been raised really quickly, and that is we need to look at this as a multi-pronged approach to everything. A big tunnel is not going to work. Our backwater valves are not going to be the solution, the be-all, end-all. Cleaning our catch basins are not going to. We need to attack this on several different fronts. And if we think that there's a magic bullet out there that we're going to be able to use, we are sadly mistaken. And if we think one town is the problem or the solution, we are sadly mistaken. So we all need to come together. That's why MDC was formed with our 8-member towns. I would like to recommend that we look at bringing our member towns together with their sustainability directors, with their public works people. Let's try and look at sustainable green infrastructure that we can try and pass as a group of 8-member towns in this. What can we do? If we can take 5 to 10% by coming up with creative solutions, that's huge. I'd like for all of the towns to meet with the MDC to talk about their priority development areas, because that may change where MDC wants to focus some attention. So if West Hartford wants to focus on this specific corridor for development, MDC knows that we're focusing on this corridor, and if there are improvements that need to happen in that location, we can all work together to get this moving forward. We need to communicate more, and that's not just on MDC reaching out, that's our towns reaching out to the MDC and making sure that they know as well. We're both responsible on this. I'd also like to just make sure that we point out that the state does have CIF dollars, maybe for small projects. Sorry, Commissioner Torres, but small stuff makes big things happen if we start to put things together. So I think a lot of small projects that we can try and help and alleviate some areas where we've had some problems or help with the development, that's where we need to go. But we need to stop pointing fingers at everybody. We need to start moving forward and causing solutions on this. So I'd really like to encourage all of us to try and look towards our towns to make some changes, communicate with the MDC, and also I think that there's a huge possibility that we need to take the lead on some issues on the sustainability front, on some other types of approach. I agree, we have a lot of expertise here, and I think we need to give our CEO and his leadership team the ability to be able to, either with funding or some direction, to be able to say, look, go forth and try some of these things. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Item number 10, report regarding staff's response to letter from Commissioners Holloway and Torres dated July 19th, 2023. Scott?
Yeah, thank you. I apologize, Commissioner Torres and Commissioner Holloway. I received this Thursday of last week, so I did not get a chance to respond to that. I will respond in detail. A lot of the questions that have come up, we have talked about on numerous occasions, but I'm happy to respond, but I did not have the opportunity to respond to that for tonight. So I will definitely get those responses out to everyone. But a lot of the questions that have come up we've talked about on numerous occasions, but I'm happy to put those in writing. Sorry.
Item 11, opportunity for general public comments.
Good evening, Commissioners. Alyssa Peterson, Hartford resident. I was not going to address this topic tonight, but I heard some comments and I'm going to address it briefly. I was accosted by one of your vendors last month, and if not for Commissioner Holloway and Commissioner Lewis, I think it would have gotten uglier. You mentioned that contractor tonight. I will be putting a complaint forth, but a person who speaks publicly should not then go sit down and be accosted by one of your vendors simply for having an opinion about what a website should contain. So I'll leave it there, and you will be getting my formal complaint, 2 complaints as a matter of fact. The other item I wanted to address tonight was, I didn't expect this to be such a long meeting. I'm so sorry. Staff is fantastic for staying here as our commissioners. Tonight, the reason why I wanted to stand up and speak was tonight was the first time I heard a little controversy, a little commentary, a little, give and take about what we expect from the different towns, what your roles are as commissioners. When you walk in that door, you are commissioners of the MDC. And while there was a little unnecessary blaming tonight, I think this board has to recognize that it's very political. You're all appointees of somebody. Hartford, I'm a Hartford resident. You have too many Hartford people on here. You've got a very strong chairman with, 40 or 50 years that seems to always grab many of the votes. So many of the other towns may not get addressed. But one of the things that I did want to comment tonight on as far as a path forward, you do need a better plan. I would really like to see some of the commissioners sit down and figure out who is going to handle the flooding in Hartford. The flooding in Hartford, if you're a nerd like me and you go back and look at the Hartford Current database or the Hartford Times database, flooding in Hartford is every year it happened. So politically, some areas got addressed, some areas didn't, and now we're seeing the repercussions. The number one thing I think I could contribute tonight is, the best idea tonight is, for the MDC with its experience and its staff, you should handle the flood commission, okay? I can tell you personally, again, being the nerd that I am, the flood commission has 5 members maybe, some are Hartford, some are East Hartford, or not East Hartford, maybe Bloomfield, Windsor. There's been vacancies on that flood commission. It's got 2 staffers, our city engineer, and Frank Delaripa, who's excellent. He was a staffer here, and Nick Gasparini. And those are 2 people. They handle, or try to handle, the flood commission projects. It's talk about sustainability. It's unsustainable. And I'll leave you with this last comment. The reason that we have flooding, we have Park River flooding, North Branch, South Branch, whatever branches there are, is we have underfunded flooding projects. I would ask all of you to type in the words Luke Bronin and Fussin O'Neill report from 2016. When Mayor Bronin took office, he was confronted with a laundry list of flood commission projects that had to get done. For 8 years, he's underfunded them. That's the reason, Commissioner, excuse me, I speak factually. Every year, you can look at where flood projects were taken out of the budget. So again, I'll finish my commentary by saying your best bet is for the MDC to take over the flood issue, and with it comes funding, a lot of funding, which I believe this organization could better manage. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Further comment?
Judy Allen, West Hartford. It's been a long night and I learned a whole lot. And I just want to say that I appreciate the time and the energy, enthusiasm and expertise of employees and staff that have obviously spent a lot of time looking at this stuff. And they deserve a attaboy. Yeah, thank you. Better person. And as I was listening to the work that was being done to involve minority and women-owned businesses, I hope that will carry through on your sewer lateral on private property in other member towns as well. Help these people move out past Hartford and work in other areas too. I would like to see that. And then this has nothing to do with what was talked about tonight, but I'm afraid I might not get a chance to say it at another time, and it has to do with the discounts, the industrial rates. And I know there was a commitment to talk about this before the budget was setting rates, but I'm afraid it's going to get lost. I am so concerned that this is a rate for only one customer, and it's designed only to have them buy more water. That has failed. They're not buying more water as a result of discounts. Is there any other place in the state that offers a discount solely to try and get a customer to use more water than they're currently using? Are these rates offered in the hopes of large volume users buying more water? Or are they designed in a way to just help a new industry that may use a lot of water to make a go of it in the area? So I just don't want that to get lost in the shuffle, so I bring it up again. Thank you.
Further comment? Commissioners' request for future agenda items? Not, the motion to adjourn is in order? Without objection, we stand adjourned.